Have you ever been told to just suck it up, to bury what you're feeling and put on a brave face? In our modern world, we often mistake Stoic detachment for emotional coldness, a kind of robotic indifference to the world's joys and sorrows. But what if I told you that true Stoic practice isn't about shutting down your emotions? What if instead it's about developing a profound and nuanced form of emotional intelligence, one that requires more self-awareness and courage than simply ignoring how you feel? The ancient Stoics weren't advocating for numbness. They were teaching us how to engage with life fully without being enslaved by our reactions. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most reflective leaders, wrote in his private meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That strength isn't the absence of feeling. It's the ability to perceive clearly, to respond wisely, and to remain inwardly steady, even when everything around you seems chaotic. This video is an exploration of that very idea, the emotional intelligence hidden within strategic detachment. We're going to move beyond the stereotypes and dive deep into how Stoicism actually helps us build a richer, more resilient inner life. It's not about suppressing what we feel, but understanding the why behind our emotions, recognizing the stories we tell ourselves, and learning where true agency lies. We'll look at how practices like the Discipline of Assent teach us to pause before we react, how Amor Fati invites us to embrace whatever life brings, and how the view from above can shrink anxiety down to size. This isn't philosophy for its own sake. It's a practical toolkit for anyone who wants to live with more clarity, purpose, and peace. Throughout this journey, we'll uncover key distinctions, like the vital difference between detaching from an outcome and disengaging from life itself. We'll discuss why letting go of what we can't control actually makes us more present, more compassionate, and even more joyful. And we'll walk through actionable ways to cultivate this skill in daily life, from handling criticism and managing anger to finding gratitude and making clearer decisions. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by your emotions or wondered how to stay calm in difficult moments, what you're about to learn could fundamentally shift how you move through the world. This is the real power of Stoic detachment, not less feeling but more freedom. So let's start by untangling one of the biggest misconceptions about Stoicism, the idea that being Stoic means being unfeeling, cold, or robotic. This image of the emotionless, granite-faced individual is a complete distortion of the philosophy. The ancient Stoics were not advocating for emotional suppression. They were masters of emotional management. They understood that emotions are a natural, human part of the experience. The goal was never to erase them, but to change our relationship with them, to prevent them from hijacking our reason and steering our lives off course. Think of it this way: your emotions are like the weather. You can step outside and observe that it's raining. You notice the clouds, you feel the drops on your skin. But you don't become the storm. You don't rage with the thunder or despair with the gray sky. You simply acknowledge the conditions, you put on a coat, and you go about your day. Stoic detachment works in a similar fashion. It's the practice of observing your internal emotional weather, the anxiety, the excitement, the anger, the joy, without letting that weather control your actions. You feel the emotion, you understand its message, but you are not swept away by it. Your inner core, your capacity to choose your response, remains steady and dry. This is where the profound wisdom of Epictetus comes in. He taught that the foundation of a good life lies in understanding what is within our control and what is not. Our opinions, our judgments, our desires, our aversions, these are within our control. Everything else, what other people say, the events that unfold around us, even our own bodies and reputations, are not. Most of our emotional turmoil arises when we desperately try to control the uncontrollable. We tie our happiness to external outcomes, to how people treat us, to things that were never ours to command. Stoic detachment is the conscious decision to untie that knot. It's about investing our energy solely in the one thing we truly own, our voluntary choices and responses. This is a subtle but monumental shift. It's the difference between trying to stop the rain and simply deciding to carry an umbrella. When a difficult emotion arises, the Stoic doesn't try to fight it or bottle it up. Instead, they pause, they ask, is this within my control? The emotion itself may not be, but my judgment about it and my reaction to it absolutely are. This isn't suppression, it's strategic engagement. It's acknowledging the feeling without letting it write the script for your next move. I want you to take a moment and reflect on your own experience. Can you recall a time when you thought you were being strong by suppressing an emotion, by pushing it down and pretending it wasn't there? Maybe it was frustration at work that you bottled up until you snapped at your family later. Or perhaps it was a sadness you refused to acknowledge, which then lingered as a low-grade numbness for weeks. Now, consider how different that might have been if you had instead simply managed it. If you had observed that frustration without immediately acting on it, giving yourself the space to understand its source and choose a constructive response. When have you mistaken the exhausting work of suppression for the empowering practice of management? This idea of building an inner sanctuary leads us directly to one of the most powerful Stoic concepts, the inner citadel. Imagine a fortress within your mind, a place of absolute calm and unshakable strength that no external event can ever breach. This isn't about building walls to hide from the world. It's about constructing a center of gravity within yourself so that no matter what storms rage outside, your core remains undisturbed. Marcus Aurelius, who faced endless political intrigue, military campaigns, and personal loss, constantly returned to this idea in his meditations. He wrote to himself, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." That fountain is your inner citadel. It's the source of your resilience, and it's built brick by brick through the practice of strategic detachment. When we talk about responding instead of reacting, this is the practical application. A reaction is immediate, raw, and often driven by impulse. It's the sharp email you fire off in anger, the defensive remark you snap back with when criticized, the wave of anxiety that paralyzes you when plans fall apart. A response, on the other hand, is chosen. It comes from that inner citadel. It's the pause you take before speaking, the space you create to ask, what is the wise thing to do here? This space is the difference between being a puppet jerked around by external events and being the one who holds the strings. Strategic detachment is the tool we use to carve out that all-important space. It's the mental step back that allows you to see the whole chessboard, not just the piece that was just taken. Consider a modern scenario, receiving harsh criticism during a performance review at work. The immediate, reactive impulse might be to feel attacked, to become defensive, to internalize the feedback as a statement about your entire worth. Your heart rate jumps, your face flushes. It's a visceral, emotional reaction. Now imagine applying Stoic detachment. You hear the same words, but you create a mental space between the criticism and your self-worth. You detach from the emotional charge and instead engage your reason. You might ask, is any of this feedback true and useful? Is the person giving it credible? What specifically is within my control to improve? By not internalizing the attack, you transform a potential emotional wound into an opportunity for growth. You respond from a place of calm assessment rather than react from a place of bruised ego. This is the tranquility Marcus Aurelius spoke of, a peace that doesn't depend on everyone being nice to you or everything going your way. It's a peace that comes from knowing that your worth and your stability are not out there in the world of events and other people's opinions. They are right here within your own judgment and character. Your inner citadel is your true home. The world can throw its worst at the gates, but inside you are safe, you are whole, and you are free to choose your next move with clarity and virtue. Think about your own life for a moment. Can you identify one situation from your recent past where creating just a little bit of that mental space could have completely changed your response? Perhaps a heated argument with a partner where things were said that couldn't be taken back, or a moment of panic when you received bad news and made a hasty decision you later regretted. What if, in that moment, you had been able to retreat to your inner citadel, not to hide but to regroup, to see the situation from a place of strength rather than vulnerability? That ability to create space is a skill, and like any skill, it strengthens with practice. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you are adding another stone to your fortress, making it stronger and more resilient for whatever comes next. Now, this brings us to one of the most crucial and practical tools in the Stoic toolkit for building that inner citadel, Epictetus's concept of the discipline of assent. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of emotional intelligence. The word assent simply means to agree with or accept something as true. And what Epictetus taught is that between any external event and our emotional reaction, there is a critical, fleeting moment. In that moment, we are presented with an initial impression, a raw, unfiltered, and often distorted interpretation of what just happened. The discipline, the real skill, is to catch that impression before we automatically assent to it, before we agree that it is the absolute truth. Our emotional responses are almost never about the event itself. They are about the story we instantly tell ourselves about the event. That story is the impression. Something happens, your boss sends a brief, one-line email, and your mind immediately serves up a story. She's angry with me. I must have done something wrong. If you assent to that impression without question, you will feel a wave of anxiety or defensiveness. Your entire afternoon might be ruined. But if you can catch that impression and hold it up to the light before you agree with it, you create the possibility of a completely different outcome. You might instead tell yourself, she's incredibly busy, this is just her efficient style, or even, I don't know the tone, I should wait for more information before I decide what this means. The event didn't change. The email is the same, but by withholding your immediate assent from the first fear-based story, you completely change your emotional reality. This is the very heart of Stoic emotional intelligence. It starts with that intentional pause, the refusal to instantly label an experience as wholly good or wholly bad. The ancient Stoics believed that most things in the world are, in themselves, indifferent. They only become good or bad based on the use we make of them with our reason. A serious illness is a preferred indifferent, no, but it can become an opportunity for courage, patience, and reflection, which are genuine goods. A promotion is a preferred indifferent, not exactly. It can become a source of arrogance, stress, and distraction from your values, which are genuine bads. The value isn't in the thing, it's in our judgment of the thing, and the discipline of assent is how we take control of that judgment. Epictetus put it perfectly when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But that reaction he's talking about isn't the emotional outburst. It's that first, silent, mental act of assenting to an impression. He urges us to examine our impressions. Strip them of the dramatic storylines they come bundled with. See the thing for what it is, plain and simple, without the added commentary from your fears or your desires. Let's make this incredibly relatable. Imagine your phone buzzes with a notification. You see it's a message from a close friend you were supposed to meet for dinner, and it just says, "Hey, something came up." Can we take a rain check? The initial impression might instantly scream, "They're blowing me off, I'm not a priority. This always happens to me." If you assent to that, you feel hurt, resentful, maybe even angry. You might send back a terse, "Fine," and the relationship takes a small, unnecessary hit. But if you practice the discipline of assent, you intercept that impression. You pause, you examine it, you might say to yourself, "I have no idea what something is. It could be a genuine emergency. It could be they're just exhausted from a hard day. My value isn't determined by their schedule." By refusing to assent to the worst-case scenario, you remain calm. Your response can be compassionate and open. "No problem at all. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're free next." You've not only preserved your own peace of mind, but also strengthened the friendship through understanding. So I want you to honestly ask yourself this question and really sit with the answer. In your own life, how often do you react immediately to things, accepting that first emotional impulse as an undeniable command? Versus how often do you grant yourself that vital moment to assess, to question the initial story, to choose your response from a place of clarity rather than impulse? That tiny space between the event and your reaction is where your freedom lies. It's the birthplace of true emotional mastery. This profound shift from resisting what happens to embracing it brings us to a powerful idea that beautifully bridges ancient wisdom and modern thought: the concept of amor fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. While the philosopher Nietzsche famously coined the term, its spirit is deeply Stoic. It's the ultimate expression of strategic detachment in action. This isn't about a passive, sighing resignation to whatever life throws at you, a kind of gloomy acceptance that says, "Well, I guess this is my lot." That's fatalism. Amor fati is something far more active and transformative. It's the conscious, willful decision to not only accept every event but to embrace it, to love it, and to see it as necessary fuel for your growth. It's about looking at every single circumstance, especially the difficult and unexpected ones, and saying, "This too is for my benefit. I will find a way to make it so." How is this possible? It becomes possible precisely through the detachment we've been discussing. When we are detached from our initial knee-jerk judgment that an event is bad, we create the mental space to ask a different question. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" we can begin to ask, "What can I do with this? How can I use this?" Detachment from resistance allows us to find value where our initial impulse only saw loss. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius constantly meditated on this idea of accepting nature's course. He wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." Amor fati is about becoming that fire. It's not about the quality of the logs you're given. Some may be wet, some may be rotten. It's about your capacity to consume them all and generate light and heat from them. The event itself is neutral. Your engaged, loving acceptance is what gives it power and purpose. Consider a very concrete, modern example. Imagine an aspiring artist who has poured years of their life, their savings, and their heart into preparing for a major gallery show. It's their big break. The week before the opening, a pipe bursts in the gallery, destroying every single piece of their work. The initial, raw reaction is one of utter devastation, grief, and anger, a completely human and understandable response. The non-Stoic path might be to fall into despair, to rage against the unfairness of the universe, to give up entirely. But a practice of amor fati would eventually guide them toward a different path. After acknowledging the pain, they would detach from the story that this event is a catastrophic, career-ending tragedy. They would begin to look for the opportunity hidden within the disaster. Perhaps this forces them to experiment with digital art, a medium they'd never considered, which opens up a whole new audience. Maybe the story of the flood and their resilience in rebuilding their portfolio creates a powerful narrative that actually generates more press and public interest than the original show ever would have. The setback, through the lens of loving acceptance, becomes the very thing that propels them forward in an unexpected and ultimately more fulfilling direction. They didn't just accept the flood, they learned to love the new river it created. This is the active embrace. It's not about pretending the loss doesn't hurt. It's about trusting in the process of life enough to believe that even the most painful events are weaving themselves into a larger tapestry that you cannot yet see the full pattern of. It's about having the faith to look at the thread of hardship and say, this dark color is necessary for the beauty of the whole. It's the ultimate act of agency, choosing the meaning you assign to the events of your life. So I'd like you to take a moment for a personal reflection. Look back over your own life's journey. Can you identify a past difficulty, a moment of failure, a rejection, or a loss that felt insurmountable at the time, but that ultimately, in some way you couldn't have predicted, led to significant growth, a new direction, or a deeper strength? Perhaps a job you didn't get that forced you to start your own business, or a relationship that ended that made space for you to discover who you are on your own. That is amor fati in your own history. Recognizing that pattern is the first step toward consciously choosing to love your fate, not just endure it from this moment forward. But how do we actually achieve that mental shift, that ability to see the hidden opportunity in a setback? The Stoics offered a powerful mental exercise to cultivate exactly this kind of perspective, a tool they called the view from above. This practice is perhaps one of the most effective ways to instantly detach from the intense, often overwhelming emotions of the present moment. It involves consciously zooming out in your mind's eye, shifting your perspective from the narrow, close-up view of your immediate problem to a vast, panoramic outlook on your entire life, the world, and even the cosmos. It's a deliberate act of mental reframing that shrinks our troubles down to their true size, revealing how small and temporary most of our anxieties truly are when placed against the grand backdrop of time and space. Think of it like using the zoom function on a camera. When you're zoomed all the way in on a single, frustrating detail, a critical comment, a missed deadline, a traffic jam, it fills the entire frame. It feels like the only thing that exists, and its emotional impact is massive. But when you zoom out, you see that same detail as just one small part of a much larger picture. You see the city you live in, the country on the globe, the planet spinning in a vast solar system among billions of stars. From that vantage point, the problem hasn't disappeared, but its power to dominate your emotional state has dramatically diminished. This is the essence of the view from above. It isn't about dismissing your problems, it's about seeing them in their proper proportion. It's a direct antidote to the anxiety that makes mountains out of molehills. This ancient technique finds a powerful echo in modern mindfulness practices, which also teach us to observe our thoughts and feelings from a distance rather than getting completely tangled up in them. Both approaches recognize that our suffering is often amplified by our limited perspective. We get so caught in the story of me and my problem that we forget we are a tiny part of a vast, unfolding universe. The Stoic philosopher Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He urged us to remember the brevity of life, pointing out how petty so many of our daily worries will seem in the long run. He said, "You live as if you were destined to live forever. No thought of your frailty ever enters your head. Of how much time has already gone by, you take no heed. You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply, though all the while that day which you bestow on some person or thing is perhaps your last." This isn't meant to be morbid, it's meant to be liberating. Remembering that our time is limited and precious is the ultimate tool for prioritization. It instantly clarifies what is truly worth our emotional energy and what is merely background noise. You can practice this right now with any current challenge you're facing. Take that situation that feels so urgent and overwhelming, a conflict at work, a financial worry, a personal disappointment. Now, close your eyes for just a moment and project your imagination 5 years into the future. Look back at your present self from that point in time. From the perspective of 5 years from now, how significant does this problem appear? In the grand scheme of your life's journey, what role did this event actually play? Chances are you'll see that what feels like a catastrophic roadblock today will likely be remembered as a minor detour, a learning experience, or perhaps even the catalyst for a positive change you couldn't see coming. The frustration you're feeling right now will have faded, replaced by the wisdom and resilience you gained from navigating it. This exercise doesn't solve the problem for you, but it does solve the anxiety about the problem. It returns to you the calm and clarity needed to address it effectively. The view from above is the ultimate tool for strategic detachment because it doesn't ask you to stop caring. It simply asks you to care from a wiser, broader point of view. It allows you to engage with life's difficulties without being engulfed by them, to hold your plans and possessions lightly, and to appreciate the incredible, fleeting miracle of your existence without wasting a single moment of it on needless worry. Now let's turn to one of the most practical and perhaps most misunderstood Stoic exercises, the Premeditatio Malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. At first glance, this sounds like a recipe for anxiety, sitting down and deliberately imagining everything that could possibly go wrong in your life, but that's a complete misreading of its purpose. This practice is not about cultivating pessimism or fear. It's about building a powerful form of emotional inoculation. It's the mental equivalent of a vaccine, where you introduce a small, controlled dose of a potential adversity to your mind so that if and when the real thing arrives, your system doesn't go into shock. You've already built up the antibodies of resilience. The core idea is brilliantly simple. By visualizing potential challenges, setbacks, or losses in vivid detail, you strip them of their element of surprise. So much of our emotional suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from the violent gap between our expectations and reality. We expect the traffic to be clear, so we rage when it's not. We expect our project to be praised, so we're crushed when it's criticized. We expect our loved ones to always be healthy, so we are utterly devastated when they fall ill. Premeditatio Malorum works by gently closing that gap ahead of time. It's not about expecting the worst to happen. It's about accepting that it could happen and realizing that you would still be okay. You would still have your character, your reason, and your ability to choose your response. This is the profound difference between a pessimistic outlook, which expects defeat, and a prepared mind, which is ready for any outcome. Seneca was a master of this technique. In his letters, he constantly advised his friend Lucilius to anticipate the whims of fortune. He wrote, "We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. Nothing ought to be unexpected by us." Our mind should be sent forward in advance to meet all the problems, and we should consider not what is wont to happen, but what can happen. He wasn't telling him to live in a state of dread. He was urging him to live in a state of profound readiness. By mentally rehearsing life's uncertainties, we transform the unknown from a terrifying specter into a familiar landscape we have already navigated in our mind. When fortune does change, as it inevitably will, the prepared Stoic meets it not with cries of "why me," but with a calm "ah, there you are, I was wondering when you'd show up." Consider a scenario almost everyone can relate to: preparing for a difficult conversation. Perhaps you need to ask your boss for a raise, confront a friend about a hurtful comment, or set a firm boundary with a family member. The default approach is often to hope for the best, to rehearse only the positive version of the conversation in your head where they immediately agree, apologize, and everything is resolved. But what happens if they react with anger, dismissal, or tears? If you've only imagined the positive path, that negative reaction can feel like a total derailment. You might freeze, become defensive, or abandon your position entirely. Now, apply the Premeditatio Malorum. Before the conversation, you take 10 minutes to sit quietly and vividly imagine the various ways it could go poorly. You picture your boss listing reasons why a raise isn't possible right now. You visualize your friend becoming defensive and turning the blame back on you. You imagine your family member guilt-tripping you, but you don't stop at the negative outcome. You continue the visualization all the way through to your own calm, virtuous response. You see yourself listening patiently to your boss's reasons and then asking, what would need to change for this to be possible in 6 months? You see yourself holding your ground with your friend, saying, I hear you're upset, but my feelings are still valid and I'd like to discuss this. You see yourself calmly reiterating your boundary to your family member without being swayed by emotional manipulation. By mentally walking through these challenging pathways, you are not inviting them to happen. You are simply ensuring that if they do, you are not caught off guard. You have already charted a course of action that aligns with your values, and you can proceed with a steadier hand and a calmer heart. This practice builds a deep and durable resilience because it moves adversity from the realm of the terrifying unknown into the category of the manageable. It confirms that you have a plan, not just for sunshine, but for rain. So I want to offer you a challenge, a very practical one. Look ahead at your week. What is one future event, big or small, that carries some uncertainty or potential for stress? It could be a work presentation, a difficult conversation, a travel day, or even a social event you're nervous about. Take just 5 minutes today to practice Premeditatio Malorum. Close your eyes and mentally rehearse not only your desired outcome, but 1 or 2 of the more challenging ways it could unfold. See yourself navigating those scenarios with composure and wisdom. This isn't negative thinking, it's strategic emotional preparation. It's how you build an inner fortitude that remains unshaken, no matter which way the winds of fortune decide to blow. This distinction between a prepared mind and a pessimistic outlook is absolutely vital because it brings us to one of the most common and damaging misconceptions about Stoicism: the idea that this kind of detachment is the same thing as indifference. Many people hear the term Stoic detachment and picture someone who is cold, uncaring, and disengaged from life, a person who simply doesn't care about anything or anyone. Nothing could be further from the truth. True Stoic detachment isn't about not caring, it's about caring in the right way. It's the profound difference between investing your effort passionately in a project and then being emotionally devastated if it fails, versus investing that same passionate effort while understanding that the final outcome is not the sole measure of your worth or your success. One is a form of emotional slavery to results. The other is a form of empowered, free engagement. Think of it as the difference between a master gardener and a desperate lottery player. The lottery player pins all their hopes, their happiness, and their sense of self on a random outcome they cannot control. When they lose, they are crushed. The master gardener, on the other hand, cares deeply for their plants. They study the soil, they provide the right amount of water and sunlight, they protect the seedlings from pests. They invest immense effort and love into their garden, but they also understand that a sudden frost, a hailstorm, or a drought is beyond their control. If disaster strikes, they are certainly disappointed. They feel the loss, but they are not destroyed by it. Their sense of value comes from the quality of their effort, their learning, and their dedication to the craft of gardening itself, not solely from the harvest. They care, but they are not controlled by the need for a specific result. This is the essence of Stoic detachment, engaged, passionate effort, coupled with internal freedom from the tyranny of the outcome. This is precisely what Epictetus was getting at when he taught that we should engage fully in the duties and relationships of life while remaining internally free. He used the beautiful analogy of a game of dice. Our role, he said, is to throw the dice skillfully and in accordance with the rules, but the number that comes up, that is not in our control. To become enraged or despondent over the result is to confuse our role. We are the thrower, not the determiner of the outcome. We can and should care deeply about throwing well, about playing the game with integrity and skill. But to chain our happiness to the specific numbers that appear is to hand over our inner peace to sheer chance. This philosophy doesn't ask us to disengage from the game of life. It asks us to play it with our whole heart, but to remember that it is, after all, a game. Our true worth is not on the table as a bet. It resides within us, in our character and our intentions, which remain ours no matter how the dice fall. Let's bring this into a modern scenario we can all relate to, caring deeply about a work project. Imagine you're leading a team on a crucial initiative. You've poured your heart and soul into it for months. You've worked late nights, crafted meticulous plans, and inspired your team to give their best. Stoic detachment does not mean you shouldn't want this project to succeed. Of course you should. It means you decouple your self-worth from its success. You invest your full effort and passion into the aspects you control: your preparation, your leadership, your team's morale, the quality of your work. But you hold lightly the aspects you cannot control: the client's final decision, shifting market conditions, a competitor's unexpected move. If the project succeeds, you celebrate the victory without letting it inflate your ego into believing you are now invincible. If it fails, you feel the professional disappointment. You conduct a sober post-mortem to learn from the experience, but you do not let it collapse your entire sense of identity into a narrative of being a failure. Your value was in the striving, the learning, and the integrity you brought to the process, and that value can never be taken from you by an external result. So I want to pose a question for you to sit with, a question that gets to the very heart of applying this wisdom. Look at the different arenas of your life, your career, your relationships, your creative pursuits, your personal goals. Where are you currently investing immense effort but also tying your sense of self, your happiness, and your peace of mind tightly to a specific result? Where could you begin to practice loosening that knot, to care just as deeply about the quality of your effort while gently releasing your grip on the outcome? This isn't about lowering your standards or expecting less. It's about raising your understanding of where your true worth actually resides. It's about playing the game with everything you have, all while knowing that your value is not determined by the final score. This entire practice of strategic detachment, from pausing before we assent to an impression to lovingly embracing our fate, hinges on one absolutely critical foundation: self-awareness. You cannot manage what you do not see. You cannot create distance from an emotional trigger if you aren't even aware that it's a trigger for you. The Stoics weren't just philosophers of logic, they were relentless cartographers of the inner world. They understood that the first and most important battlefield is within our own minds, and to navigate it, we need a detailed and honest map. This requires a keen, almost surgical, level of self-awareness, a constant, gentle examination of our judgments, our reactions, and the hidden patterns that drive them. Think of it like this: if your emotions are the weather, self-awareness is your internal barometer and weather satellite system. It doesn't control the weather, but it gives you the data. It tells you a low-pressure system of anxiety is moving in, or that a sudden flash of anger is likely a thunderstorm brewing from a clash of unmet expectations. Without that data, you're just caught in the downpour, soaked and confused. With it, you can see the storm coming, understand its nature, and take appropriate action. You can put on your emotional raincoat, you can find shelter, you can wait it out without being swept away. Strategic detachment is that raincoat, but self-awareness is what tells you that you need to put it on. Marcus Aurelius, in the private pages of his Meditations, exemplifies this practice perfectly. He wasn't writing for publication, he was engaged in a daily dialogue with himself, a constant act of self-examination. He repeatedly reminds himself to look within, to return to the simplicity of his own guiding principles. In one powerful passage, he writes, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig." That digging he's talking about is the work of self-awareness. It's the deliberate effort to clear away the debris of automatic reactions, social conditioning, and ego to get to the clear, cool spring of your core character and reason. He wasn't gazing at his navel, he was taking inventory of his soul, ensuring his internal compass was always pointing toward virtue. So how do we actually build this crucial skill? The Stoics had a primary tool for this, one that remains just as powerful today: the practice of journaling. But this isn't journaling as a simple diary of events. This is philosophical journaling, a structured exercise in self-examination. A powerful prompt drawn directly from this need for self-awareness is to regularly ask yourself, what emotion consistently shows up and causes me to stumble? Where do I most frequently lose my sense of calm and clarity? Is it a flash of anger when I feel disrespected? A wave of anxiety when faced with uncertainty? A sharp pang of envy when I see a peer's success? The goal isn't to judge yourself for feeling this emotion, but to simply identify it with curiosity and precision. You are the scientist, and your emotional life is the phenomenon you are studying. Once you've identified that recurring emotional response, the next step is to trace it back to its source, the underlying judgment or belief that fuels it. The Stoics believed that emotions are not caused by external events, but by our beliefs about those events. That surge of anger in traffic isn't caused by the car in front of you. It's caused by your belief that your journey should be unimpeded, that other drivers are incompetent, that this delay is a personal injustice. Your anxiety about a presentation isn't caused by the presentation itself. It's fueled by your belief that your worth is on the line, that you might be judged negatively, that failure would be catastrophic. Self-awareness allows you to catch that belief in the act. You can then hold it up to the light of reason and ask, is this belief true? Is it helpful? Is it within my control? This is where the magic happens. This is where you move from being a passenger in your emotional life to becoming the pilot. So let's make this personal and practical. I want you to pause and genuinely ask yourself the question we started with. What is the one emotion you most often need to create distance from? Don't answer quickly, sit with it. Is it the hot rush of frustration when things don't go your way? The cold grip of fear about an uncertain future? The heavy weight of resentment over a past wrong? Just naming it is the first and most powerful act of detachment. By naming it, you are no longer fully identified with it. You are the one who is aware of the anger, which means you are not, in that moment, solely the anger itself. That tiny gap of awareness is the foothold for your freedom. It's the space where you can choose to engage your reason, to apply the disciplines of assent and desire, and to respond to the world from your inner citadel rather than react from a place of unconscious trigger. Your emotional life becomes a landscape you can navigate with intention, not a storm that simply tosses you about. Now, let's bring this profound self-awareness into one of the most complex and rewarding areas of our lives, our relationships with others. How do we apply Stoic detachment when interacting with the people we care about most? This is where the philosophy moves from personal practice to interpersonal art. The goal is not to build walls or create emotional distance from our loved ones. It is to learn how to love them fully, deeply, and freely, without that love becoming a source of dependency, control, or emotional turmoil. It's about being a steady anchor in the storm for someone else, without being pulled into the raging waves yourself. Seneca, in his beautiful letters on friendship, offers some of the clearest guidance on this delicate balance. He writes that we should live for our friend, but not for our friend in the sense of losing ourselves. He advises that we should enjoy their company, share in their joys and sorrows, and offer them our complete support, all while maintaining our own inner stability. He warns against becoming so emotionally enmeshed that our friend's mood becomes our mood, their problems become our sole focus, and their choices dictate our happiness. A true Stoic friend, Seneca suggests, is like a sturdy harbor. The ships our friends can come and go. They can be tossed by great storms out at sea, but the harbor remains calm, deep, and unwavering, always there to offer safe refuge. The harbor does not get on the ship and sail into the hurricane. It provides a place of safety to which the ship can return. This is the essence of detached compassion, being fully present and supportive without taking ownership of another person's emotional state or life path. This concept is incredibly relevant when we consider the modern idea of empathy, which is often misunderstood as needing to feel exactly what the other person is feeling. If a friend is drowning in grief, the non-Stoic approach might be to jump into the water with them, to share their despair so completely that you both end up struggling to stay afloat. While this comes from a place of deep care, it often leaves both people exhausted and without a clear path to shore. The Stoic approach, guided by detachment, is different. You remain on the solid ground of your own equanimity. You extend a hand, you throw a lifeline, you offer your full presence and listening ear. You acknowledge their pain completely. I see you are suffering. This is terrible, I am here with you, but you do not internalize their suffering as your own. You hold space for their emotion without making it your emotion. This allows you to be a far more effective source of support. Because you are not also drowning, you can think clearly, offer practical help, and provide the calm, reassuring presence they truly need. Your stability becomes a gift you can offer them, rather than another wave of distress adding to their storm. Imagine a close friend calls you in a state of panic. They've just been laid off from their job. They're terrified about finances, feeling worthless and utterly overwhelmed. The reactive, enmeshed response would be to immediately mirror their panic. You might start spiraling yourself, thinking, "Oh no, this is awful. What are they going to do? How will they pay their mortgage? I need to fix this right now." Your anxiety rises, your own heart starts racing, and the conversation becomes a shared cycle of fear and catastrophizing. Now consider the Stoic, detached response, rooted in Seneca's idea of the harbor. You listen deeply, you validate their feelings completely. That is incredibly stressful news. I understand why you're feeling so scared and upset right now. You are fully present and compassionate. but internally you maintain your detachment from the story that this is a world-ending catastrophe. You know that your friend's worth is not defined by their job and that this setback, while painful, is manageable. From this place of calm, you can ask thoughtful questions. What is the first small step we can take? Would it help to look at your budget together? Would you like me to help you update your resume tomorrow? You are not absorbing their distress, you are containing it with your calm, and then helping them navigate it with practical, reasoned support. You are being the harbor, not another storm-tossed ship. This practice of detached engagement is perhaps the greatest gift we can give in our relationships. It allows us to show up for people without burning out, to love without smothering, and to care without controlling. It requires us to do our own inner work first, to have built that inner citadel through self-awareness and discipline, so that we have a well of stability from which to draw for others. It is the ultimate expression of the Stoic ideal, to be in the world, engaged with others while remaining inwardly free. So I want to leave you with a question to reflect on, one that gets to the very heart of compassionate detachment. In your own life, with your partner, your family, your friends, or your colleagues, how can you practice being more fully present for them while simultaneously protecting your own emotional balance? How can you learn to be the calm harbor for someone you love, offering them refuge and strength without feeling you must lose your own footing to prove you care? This isn't about building walls, it's about building a foundation so strong that you can be a true source of support for others, not just for a moment but for the long haul. Now, let's apply this idea of creating space to one of the most powerful and destructive emotions we face, anger. Few things feel as immediate and all-consuming as a surge of rage. It's a fire in the chest, a narrowing of vision, an overwhelming urge to act often in ways we later profoundly regret. The Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote an entire volume on anger, dedicated to understanding and disarming this volatile emotion. His central argument is that anger is a temporary madness, a brief frenzy that is fundamentally at odds with reason, and his primary prescription for combating it is a simple yet profoundly difficult act: strategic detachment. He advises us to create distance, to grant ourselves time for the initial heat to cool off before we even consider responding. This pause is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate exercise of strength and self-command. Seneca brilliantly identifies the root of most anger not in the external event itself, but in the internal collision between reality and our expectations. We get angry when the world fails to conform to our personal script. We expect the traffic to be clear, so we rage at the congestion. We expect our partner to remember our request, so we fume when they forget. We expect to be treated with fairness and respect, so we erupt when we perceive an insult. The anger is the emotional outcry against this gap between what we wanted and what we got. The Stoic solution is to detach first and foremost from the rigidity of those expectations. It's to understand that the world does not owe us conformity to our personal desires. People will act according to their own nature, events will unfold according to complex causes, and our peace of mind cannot be hostage to all of it. By loosening our grip on how we think things should be, we inoculate ourselves against the shock and fury of when they are not. The practical steps Seneca offers are remarkably straightforward, though they require immense discipline. The very first and most important step is to simply delay your reaction. At the moment anger flares, your judgment is compromised. You cannot trust your own thoughts. Therefore, the only wise action is to commit to no action. Seneca suggests literally telling yourself to wait, postpone your response until tomorrow, or even just for an hour. If you feel a furious letter must be written, write it, then set it aside and read it again the next day. you will almost certainly never send it. This deliberate pause is the practical application of the discipline of assent we discussed earlier. You are refusing to immediately assent to the initial impression that you have been grievously wronged and must retaliate. You are creating a buffer zone between the provocation and your reply, and in that space, reason has a chance to reassert itself. He captures the fleeting, self-consuming nature of anger with a powerful observation. No plague has cost the human race more dear. But he also notes its fundamental weakness, writing, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. This is because anger is like a fire. It needs constant fuel to keep burning." That fuel is our own obsessive thoughts, our mental replaying of the insult, our vivid imaginings of retaliation. When we delay, we starve the fire. The initial, white-hot intensity begins to fade all on its own, revealing the situation underneath, which is almost always more nuanced and less personally catastrophic than our anger made it seem. The delay allows you to shift from asking, "How dare they?" to asking the far more productive Stoic questions. What part of this is within my control? Is my response aligned with my character? What can actually be repaired or learned here? Think of a time you were last truly angry. Perhaps it was a colleague taking credit for your work, a loved one making a careless and hurtful remark, or another driver behaving recklessly and endangering others. In that moment, the impulse to lash out, to send a scathing email, to scream an insult, or to engage in road rage felt justified and powerful, but recall what happened after the anger subsided. If you acted on it, you likely felt shame, regret, or found you had created an even bigger problem to solve. If you managed to pause, even for a few seconds, you likely found a better path, a calm conversation, a deliberate setting of a boundary, or simply taking a deep breath and letting a minor transgression go. That space, however small, is where your freedom lies. It's the difference between being a prisoner of your own temper and being the author of your actions. So I invite you to reflect on this. Can you recall a specific instance where creating just a moment of strategic distance, of deliberate pause, could have transformed your raw anger into a response that was constructive, virtuous, and truly powerful? This ability to pause before anger takes the wheel is a powerful skill, but its value extends far beyond managing our temper. In fact, this same principle of creating mental space is the very key to making clearer, wiser decisions in every area of our lives. When we learn to detach from the immediate emotional charge of a situation, we essentially remove the static that clouds our judgment, allowing us to hear the clear signal of reason. The Stoics saw decision-making not as a matter of following gut feelings or fleeting desires, but as a disciplined process of aligning our choices with nature, virtue, and logic. They developed specific exercises to cultivate this impartial viewpoint, training themselves to see options not as what I want versus what I fear, but as pathways that are either in accordance with a good life or not. One such exercise involved mentally distancing themselves from the personal stakes of a choice. They might imagine they were advising a close friend on the very same dilemma. Suddenly, the decision isn't mired in their own anxieties, pride, or attachments. It becomes a simpler question of what constitutes the right, the honorable, or the most rational course of action. Another practice was to project themselves into the future and look back on the decision from that vantage point. From the perspective of 5 or 10 years down the road, which choice would they be most proud of? Which one would have contributed to a life of integrity and purpose? This method of leveraging the view from above on our own lives is a profound way to cut through the noise of short-term emotional bias and connect with our long-term values. Marcus Aurelius constantly reinforced this commitment to reason in his meditations. He reminded himself to strip away the opinion, the story, and the emotional weight attached to an event and see the thing itself in its plain, simple reality. He wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it, and it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." This applies directly to our choices. The anxiety we feel about a decision is rarely about the facts of the options themselves. It's about our judgment of what those outcomes will mean for our ego, our security, or our status. By wiping away that judgment, we can assess the options based on their actual merits. Consider a common business scenario. Imagine a company leader is faced with a difficult choice: to invest a significant portion of their budget in an innovative but risky new project, or to play it safe and allocate those funds to improving existing, reliable products. The emotional biases at play could be immense. The leader's ego might be tied to the flashy, innovative project. It would be more exciting, it would garner more industry attention, and it would be a legacy-defining gamble. Conversely, fear might be screaming to avoid risk, to protect current revenue streams, and to not be the person who failed spectacularly. A decision made from either of these emotional places, ego or fear, is inherently unstable. Now apply Stoic detachment. The leader would consciously set aside personal pride and anxiety. They would look at the decision impartially, perhaps even imagining they are a consultant brought in to advise another company. They would analyze the data. What is the realistic market potential for the innovation? What is the true financial cushion if it fails? Which option better serves the long-term health of the company and the well-being of its employees? The choice is no longer about what makes me look good or what I'm afraid of. It's a clear-eyed evaluation of the best path forward. The final decision might still be to take the risk, but it will be for reasoned, strategic reasons, not impulsive ones. Or it might be to play it safe, but as a confident strategic choice, not a retreat born of fear. This applies just as powerfully to our personal lives. Think about a decision to end a long-term relationship, change careers, or move to a new city. These choices are often fraught with emotion, guilt, nostalgia, fear of the unknown, or the excitement of a fresh start. Detachment allows us to honor those feelings without letting them become the sole arbiters of our fate. We can ask ourselves, if my best friend described this exact situation to me, what advice would I give them? If I fast forward to the end of my life, will I regret more having taken this chance or having stayed safe? By creating that space, we make room for our wisest self to speak, rather than our most fearful or eager self. So I want you to turn this lens on your own experience. Look back over the recent past, over the last few weeks or months. Can you identify one decision you made that might have turned out differently, or simply with more clarity and confidence, if you had been able to temporarily remove the influence of a strong emotion? Perhaps a financial purchase driven by a momentary desire rather than long-term need, a reaction in an argument that escalated rather than resolved, or even a choice to say yes to an obligation out of guilt rather than genuine willingness. Recognizing that pattern is the first step toward changing it. It's about realizing that our best decisions aren't made in the heat of feeling, but in the calm clarity that comes after we've given ourselves permission to step back and observe. This idea that detachment somehow drains the color from life, that it leaves us in a gray, joyless state, is perhaps the most persistent and ironic myth about Stoic practice. The truth is almost the exact opposite. Real freedom, the kind that allows for genuine, unshakable joy, doesn't come from clinging tighter to the things we love for fear of losing them. It comes from the profound understanding that our capacity for happiness was never in those external things to begin with. It was always an inside job. The Stoic practice of strategic detachment isn't about building a wall between you and the world's beauty. It's about taking off the distorting lenses of attachment and fear so you can finally see that beauty clearly and appreciate it fully, without the underlying anxiety that it might be taken away. Epictetus, who understood the nature of freedom better than most, put his finger on the very heart of this idea. He taught that happiness and peace are not remote treasures we must chase and capture in the outside world. They are internal states we cultivate by correctly managing our desires, our aversions, and most importantly, our judgments. He said, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle: some things are within our control and some things are not." When we stop trying to control the uncontrollable, when we detach our happiness from specific outcomes, possessions, or the approval of others, we are not moving toward emptiness. We are moving toward the only source of true and lasting joy that exists, our own inner citadel, our own reasoned choice to find value and beauty in the present moment, exactly as it is. Think about the difference between two people enjoying a beautiful, perfect day at the beach. The first person is deeply attached to the experience. They are mentally clinging to it. Their enjoyment is real, but it's tinged with a subtle background sadness. They're already dreading the end of the day, already worried that the weather might turn tomorrow, already feeling the pang of loss even as the sun shines on them. Their joy is fragile, contingent on everything remaining exactly as it is. Now, consider the second person, who approaches the same day with a stoic sense of detachment. They are no less present. They feel the sun's warmth just as deeply. They hear the crash of the waves just as clearly. They laugh with their friends just as freely. But because they have released their grip on the experience, because they accept its temporary nature without resistance, their enjoyment is actually purer and more profound. There is no undercurrent of fear. They are not enjoying the day in spite of its impermanence. They are enjoying it because of its impermanence, understanding that its fleeting nature is what makes it precious. This is the secret. Detachment allows us to appreciate things for what they are, not for how long we can hold onto them. This transforms our entire relationship with the good things in life. We can savor a delicious meal without needing the feast to last forever. We can revel in a professional success without tying our entire identity to our job title. We can love someone deeply without the suffocating fear of losing them, poisoning the love itself. The joy is no longer conditional. It's not, "I will be happy if this lasts," or "I will be happy when I get that." The joy becomes a default state, a conscious choice to engage fully with the gift of the present, whatever it contains. Letting go of attachment doesn't decrease our capacity for joy, it unleashes it. It allows our happiness to become independent of the constantly changing, unpredictable circumstances of the external world. It moves joy from a fragile object we must protect on a high shelf to a renewable resource that wells up from within us. So the next time you find yourself in a moment of pure happiness, pause and ask yourself, is my enjoyment of this moment complete, or is there a subtle sense of clinging, a fear of its end? How might letting go of that fear actually allow me to sink even more deeply into the joy that is already here? This brings us to a critical distinction that separates healthy Stoic practice from a complete misunderstanding of its purpose. Embracing strategic detachment does not mean slamming the door on your emotional life. The Stoic goal was never to become an unfeeling statue, impervious to the full spectrum of human experience. On the contrary, a core tenet of this philosophy is emotional validation, the conscious act of acknowledging a feeling, understanding its message, and then deciding how to engage with it wisely. This is the precise opposite of emotional denial or the modern pressure of toxic positivity, which often insists that we should only feel good emotions and quickly dismiss anything else as negative. The Stoics understood that to be human is to feel. and their system is not a bypass for that reality, but a roadmap for navigating it with grace and intelligence. We can find profound wisdom on this front in Seneca's letters, particularly those he wrote to his friend Lucilius while Seneca himself was grappling with grief. He did not tell himself to just get over it or to look on the bright side. That would be denial. Instead, he engaged with his sorrow consciously. He allowed himself to feel the weight of his loss, to sit with the emptiness, but he did so with a mindful awareness. He observed the emotion without letting it consume his entire identity or dictate his actions for months on end. He wrote about giving grief its due time and space, but also about the importance of eventually re-engaging with life's duties and joys. This is experiencing grief wisely. It is the middle path between two unhealthy extremes. On one end, completely suppressing the pain and pretending it doesn't exist, and on the other, being utterly overwhelmed by it, allowing it to define you and halt your forward progress. Seneca validated the emotion by giving it his attention, but he refused to be ruled by it. So what do healthy Stoic processing methods actually look like in practice? It begins with that moment of mindful acknowledgement. When a strong emotion arises, be it anger, jealousy, anxiety, or sadness, the first step is to simply name it. To say to yourself, "I am feeling anger right now." This simple act of labeling creates immediate distance. You are no longer just angry, you are a person who is aware that anger is present. This is the foothold of detachment. From that place of awareness, you can then engage your reason. You can gently inquire into the emotion's source, often tracing it back to a judgment or an unmet expectation. You might ask, what story am I telling myself about this situation that is making me feel this way? Is that story entirely true? This isn't about arguing the feeling away, it's about understanding its origin. Finally, you channel the energy of the emotion into a virtuous action. Instead of lashing out in anger, you might use that energy to set a firm but calm boundary. Instead of wallowing in anxiety, you might channel it into thorough preparation for the event you're worried about. The feeling is not the enemy, it is data. It is a signal. Your job is to interpret the signal and choose the most constructive response. This balanced approach requires honest self-reflection. It's worth taking a moment to look at your own patterns. In your life, do you find that you tend to fall more into the habit of suppression, quickly pushing down uncomfortable feelings because they seem messy or inconvenient? Or do you tend to go to the other extreme, giving your emotions total power, allowing a bad mood to ruin your entire day or a moment of fear to talk you out of an important opportunity? True Stoic balance looks like creating a compassionate space for your feelings to exist without letting them sit in the driver's seat. It means listening to what your emotions have to tell you, thanking them for the information, and then making a conscious, values-driven choice about what to do next. This is how we move from being passive passengers in our emotional lives to becoming skilled pilots, acknowledging every shift in the weather while keeping a steady hand on the controls. Now that we've explored the theory and the profound applications, you might be wondering how to actually build this skill into the fabric of your daily life. How do you move these grand ideas from the pages of philosophy into the practical reality of your morning coffee, your commute, and your evening wind down? The answer lies in turning strategic detachment from a concept into a consistent practice, a kind of daily mental hygiene. The Stoics themselves were not armchair philosophers. They were men of action who embedded specific exercises into their routines to keep their principles sharp and their minds clear. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, didn't just write his meditations as a one-off project. It was his personal journal, a daily practice of self-examination and realignment that he returned to again and again, often in the quiet hours of the morning before the demands of the empire came crashing in. We can draw direct inspiration from his routine to create our own simple, sustainable rituals. One of the most powerful ways to start your day is with a brief morning meditation, not in the sense of emptying your mind, but in the Stoic sense of preparing it. This takes just a few minutes before you even check your phone. Find a moment of quiet, bring to mind the core Stoic dichotomy of control, mentally outline the day ahead of you. Visualize the meetings, the tasks, the interactions. For each one, gently remind yourself, I do not control the outcome of this presentation, but I control my preparation and my effort. I do not control my colleague's mood, but I control my patience and my response. I do not control the traffic, but I control whether I use that time to listen to something enriching or to stew in frustration. This isn't about pessimism, it's about proactive mental framing. You are consciously placing your focus and your energy squarely on your own actions and judgments, which are the only things you can truly command. You are building your inner citadel at the start of the day, so it's already strong when you need to retreat to it later. Then, as the day closes, the Stoics practiced a form of evening review. This is a time for gentle, non-judgmental reflection. Look back over the events of your day. Where did you manage to create that space between an event and your reaction? Celebrate those moments, however small. Perhaps you felt a flash of irritation in a long line, but chose to take a deep breath instead of sighing loudly. That's a victory. Then, with equal compassion, look at the moments where you were caught off guard, where an emotional trigger took the wheel. Ask yourself, what was the initial impression I assented to in that moment? What underlying belief was driving my reaction? How could I apply the discipline of assent tomorrow in a similar situation? The goal of this review is not to beat yourself up for failing to be a perfect Stoic sage. It's to become a better student of your own mind. It's a daily debrief that turns every experience, both smooth and rough, into a lesson for the next day. A wonderfully simple ritual you can incorporate almost anywhere is the pause and reorient practice. Set a random alarm on your phone for 2 or 3 different times during your day. When it goes off, no matter what you're doing, just stop for 15 seconds. In that moment, ask yourself one question. Right now, am I focused on what's within my control, or am I wrestling with something outside of it? You might be worrying about a future event you can't dictate, or ruminating on a past comment you can't take back. That gentle alarm is a cue to consciously hand those things back to the universe and to return your attention to your own sphere of action, your current task, your attitude, your next rational step. This tiny, repeated act is like a rep for your detachment muscle, strengthening your ability to recenter yourself amidst the noise of daily life. The beauty of these practices is that they require no special equipment or huge time commitments. They simply require intention. They are the small, consistent actions that build the monumental resilience we've been discussing. So, as we consider how to make this wisdom real, I want to leave you with a single, focused question to carry into your week. Look at your own routine, your own patterns. What is one small, daily habit you could realistically build to strengthen this muscle of detachment? It doesn't have to be grand. Maybe it's dedicating the first 2 minutes of your shower to that morning meditation on control. Perhaps it's writing one sentence in a notebook as your evening review. It could be that random alarm cue to reorient. The specific practice matters less than the consistency. Choose one anchor point in your day and attach this new intention to it. That single, small commitment, repeated daily, is how you transform ancient philosophy into living wisdom. and how you build an unshakable peace that can withstand anything the world brings your way. The pain of loss can feel like a void, a unique and profound sorrow that seems to defy any philosophical remedy. It is in these moments, when grief washes over us, that the Stoic practice of detachment reveals its most compassionate and nuanced face. This is not a cold, emotionless dismissal of our pain. It is not about telling ourselves not to feel. Rather, it is about how we choose to relate to those feelings and the immutable reality of impermanence that they point to. Stoicism offers us a way to honor our grief fully, to feel its weight without being crushed by it, by consciously aligning our perspective with the natural order of life itself. It is the difference between raging against the storm and learning how to stand in the rain without dissolving. Seneca, who wrote extensively on consoling others and himself in times of loss, provides some of the most tender and realistic guidance. He does not advise us to bypass our sadness. Instead, he encourages us to move through it with awareness. In one of his letters, he acknowledges the humanity of grief, writing, "Let not the eyes be dry when we have lost a friend, nor let them overflow." We may weep, but we must not wail. This distinction is everything. Weeping is the natural, human expression of love and loss. It is the honest acknowledgement of a bond that mattered deeply. Wailing, in the Stoic sense, is the added layer of suffering we create through our resistance, the cries of, "This isn't fair," or "Why did this have to happen?" Detachment in grief is about letting the tears flow while gently releasing the narrative of injustice we so often attach to death, which is, after all, the most natural and predictable event in all of life. To understand this, we can look to nature itself. The Stoics were great observers of the natural world, seeing in its cycles a mirror for human existence. Consider a mighty oak tree in the heart of autumn. It does not cling to its leaves in a desperate attempt to hold onto summer. It allows them to change color, to wither, and to fall, understanding this surrender not as a failure or a tragedy, but as a necessary part of its cycle. The tree is no less itself in its bare winter state. In fact, this period of rest is essential for its renewal come spring. Our experience of loving and losing is not so different. The love we shared with someone who has died does not disappear when they are gone. It simply changes form, like those autumn leaves returning to the earth to become part of the soil from which new life grows. The pain we feel is the price of that profound connection, and the Stoic approach asks us to accept that cost as part of the beautiful, heartbreaking contract of love, rather than treating it as a brutal violation of how things should be. History offers a powerful anecdote in the figure of Marcus Aurelius, who faced immense personal loss, burying several of his children. His private journal, never intended for publication, shows a man grappling not with cold indifference, but with a profound effort to reconcile his deep love for his family with his philosophical understanding of nature's way. He didn't try to erase his grief. He wrote to remind himself to accept it as part of the human experience, to see the death of a loved one not as a theft but as a return. He counseled himself to focus not on the years he would not have with them, but on the incredible gift of the years he did. This shift in perspective doesn't eliminate the sadness, but it can prevent that sadness from curdling into a permanent state of bitter despair. It allows us to hold our loss in one hand and our gratitude in the other, acknowledging the weight of both. This practice grants us a certain sacred freedom, the freedom to remember with more love than pain. When we are no longer fighting the fact of a loss, we can begin to truly celebrate the life that was lived. We can share stories that make us laugh through our tears. We can feel their presence in a song, a place, a tradition, without that memory being immediately overwhelmed by the agony of their absence. The detachment here is from the struggle against reality itself. It is the ultimate act of amor fati, of loving one's fate applied to the most difficult of circumstances. It is saying, this hurt is part of my story because that love was part of my story, and I would not trade the love to avoid the hurt. This is how we carry our losses without being carried away by them, integrating them into the fabric of who we are, making our grief a testament to love rather than a monument to suffering. But this practice of non-attachment isn't only for weathering life's storms. It's equally vital for navigating its brightest days and highest peaks. Success and praise can be just as destabilizing as failure and criticism, perhaps even more insidiously so, because they stroke the ego rather than wound it. The intoxicating allure of external validation is a powerful force, and without a conscious practice of detachment, it's frighteningly easy to become dependent on it, to start mistaking the applause for the value of the performance itself. The Stoic approach here is not to reject praise with false humility, but to receive it graciously while understanding its true, limited nature, ensuring it never becomes the foundation upon which your self-worth is built. Marcus Aurelius, a man who experienced the highest levels of fame and power any human could attain, constantly meditated on its hollow nature. From the pinnacle of imperial power, he saw with absolute clarity that the cheers of the crowds, the honors bestowed upon him, the monuments built in his name, all of it was fleeting and ultimately meaningless. He wrote to himself, "So what is it you're wanting, praise, but look at the minds of those who praise you. What are their wishes? What do they avoid? How quickly their praises are forgotten, and how quickly those who praised you will be gone." His point was not that praise is evil, but that it is ephemeral and often based on the fickle, flawed judgments of others. To anchor your sense of self to something so transient and unreliable is to build your house on sand. The same crowd that cheers you today may well condemn you tomorrow, and if your inner stability is tied to their opinion, you will be tossed about on a violent sea of their changing whims. The practical application of this is a subtle art. It's not about deflecting a compliment with a self-deprecating remark, which can actually be another form of ego, a way of fishing for more reassurance. True Stoic detachment in the face of praise is about accepting the kindness of the gesture while mentally placing the words in their proper context. Imagine a colleague tells you, "That was an incredible presentation, you're a genius." The undisciplined, attached mind might immediately internalize this, letting the compliment inflate their ego, making them feel superior and setting them up for a painful fall the next time they make a mistake. The Stoic mind, however, hears the same words and might think, "That is a generous and kind thing for them to say. It reflects their perception of my effort in this moment." They appreciate the human connection and encouragement, but they do not use the comment as evidence to update their own self-assessment. Their self-worth was secure before the compliment, and it remains secure afterward because it is rooted in their own knowledge of their effort, their intentions, and their character, things that are within their control, not in the external verdict of another person, which is not. This same principle forms a perfect shield against criticism as well. If you are not inflated by praise, you cannot be deflated by its opposite. The same mental muscle that allows you to receive a compliment without letting it go to your head allows you to receive negative feedback without letting it go to your heart. You learn to see both praise and criticism as two sides of the same coin. External data points that may or may not be accurate or useful, but which ultimately have no power to define you unless you grant them that power. Your internal scorecard, did I act with integrity, did I do my best, did I learn something, becomes the only one that truly matters. This is the essence of staying grounded. It's not a lack of feeling, it's a profound inner equilibrium that remains steady whether the world is shouting your name or calling you a failure. because you know that both are merely sounds that have nothing to do with the silent, solid truth of who you are. This brings us to a beautiful and perhaps surprising Stoic paradox, that true, effective empathy is not born from total emotional fusion with another person, but actually requires a foundation of healthy detachment. We often fall into the trap of believing that to really understand someone's pain, we must feel it exactly as they do, to the same intensity. We think that diving headfirst into their emotional storm is the highest form of compassion. But the Stoics and modern psychology alike would argue that this approach often leads to empathy fatigue, burnout, and ultimately less effective support. What looks like deep connection can actually be a form of emotional enmeshment that leaves both people drowning. True empathy, the kind that can truly hold space for another, requires us to be the calm harbor, not another ship tossed in the same hurricane. The Stoic ideal here is compassion without compulsion. This means feeling for someone rather than necessarily feeling as them. It is the ability to recognize and understand another person's emotional state, to wish for their suffering to be alleviated, and to offer support, all while maintaining your own inner equilibrium. The Stoics were deeply committed to the welfare of others. It was a core part of their philosophy of living in accordance with nature and fulfilling our social duty. But they believed this duty could only be performed effectively from a place of stability. If you are emotionally overwhelmed by another's pain, your capacity for rational action, for clear-headed support, and for sustained presence dramatically diminishes. Your own distress becomes a problem that needs managing, pulling focus and energy away from the person you're trying to help. Consider a professional caregiving scenario, like a nurse working in an oncology ward. If this nurse were to become completely emotionally fused with each patient, truly taking on the full weight of their fear, their anger, and their grief, she would be emotionally obliterated within a week. She would be unable to provide the calm, competent, and steady care that is so desperately needed. Her effectiveness and her career would be short-lived. Instead, the most compassionate and skilled caregivers learn to cultivate a professional detachment. This doesn't mean they are cold or uncaring, far from it. It means they can sit with a terrified patient, hold their hand, listen deeply to their concerns, and offer comfort, all while managing their own emotional responses. They feel profound compassion, but they are not compelled to collapse under the shared weight of the diagnosis. This emotional distance is what allows them to be a pillar of strength, to think clearly about pain management, to remember important details, and to show up day after day with a warm and present heart. Their detachment is not a barrier to empathy. It is the very thing that makes their empathy sustainable and powerful. This principle applies just as powerfully in our personal lives. Imagine a close friend is going through a devastating divorce. They call you, sobbing, their world crumbling. The enmeshed, non-stoic reaction would be to immediately join them in their despair. You might start crying too, telling them how terrible their ex is, amplifying their anger, and soon the conversation becomes a mutual spiral of pain and hopelessness. While this comes from a place of love, it ultimately offers no real anchor. The Stoic approach, rooted in detached empathy, would be different. You would listen with your whole heart. You would validate their feelings completely. This is heartbreaking. I am so sorry you are going through this unimaginable pain. You would be fully present. But internally, you would hold onto your own calm. You would not assent to the catastrophic story that their life is over. From that place of inner steadiness, you can be far more helpful. You can ask gentle, guiding questions that help them think beyond the immediate pain. What is one tiny thing that might feel good right now? A walk outside. Would it help if I came over and we could just sit together? You are not absorbing their distress. you are containing it within your own calm presence, which allows them to feel safe enough to finally begin processing it. The emotional distance you maintain is not a gap in your caring. It's the space where your clear-headed compassion can operate. It allows you to be truly for your friend, rather than simply being another casualty of their situation. So the next time you want to be there for someone you love, ask yourself, am I trying to jump into the hole with them, or am I preparing to stand at the edge, ready to offer a hand and help them climb out? This relentless churn of anxiety about what might happen is perhaps one of the most universal forms of human suffering, a mental trap that pulls us out of the only reality we ever truly have, the present moment. The Stoic response to this isn't a complex set of rules, but a profound shift in attention, a deliberate act of detachment from the terrifying, yet entirely fictional, worlds our minds so love to create. Epictetus, with his characteristic bluntness, cut straight to the heart of the matter. Man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. He's pointing to a stunning truth. We suffer first and most acutely not in the actual events of our lives, but in the elaborate, fear-soaked stories we spin about those events long before they ever occur. Our anxiety is almost always a response to a phantom, a ghost of a possibility that we have mistaken for a solid, impending reality. This is where strategic detachment becomes our most practical tool for liberation. It is the mental action of consciously unhooking our attention from the terrifying movie of the future that's playing in our heads and returning it, again and again, to the sensory reality of the present. It's not about denying that challenges may come. It's about refusing to pay the emotional price for them until they actually arrive, if they ever do. Think of it as a kind of radical fiscal responsibility for your emotional energy. Why spend your entire life savings of mental peace on a disaster that exists only as a set of electrical impulses in your brain? The Stoic practice is to declare bankruptcy on that fictional debt and to invest your attention instead in the currency of the now, which is the only currency that is ever actually available to you. This ancient wisdom finds a powerful echo in modern mindfulness, which is essentially the practical, secular application of this same Stoic principle. Mindfulness techniques are the how-to manual for this present moment focus. A simple but profoundly effective method is the practice of grounding yourself through your senses. When you feel the familiar swirl of anxious thoughts beginning, that tightening in your chest, the rapid heartbeat, the racing mind, you can consciously pause and perform a quick inventory. Look around and name 5 things you can see, not just as objects, but noticing their colors, textures, and shapes. Then, shift your attention to 4 things you can feel: the solid pressure of your feet on the floor, the texture of your shirt against your skin, the coolness of the air on your face. Listen for 3 distinct sounds, perhaps the hum of a computer, the distant sound of traffic, or your own breath. This isn't a trick to magically make your problems disappear. It's a tool to forcibly evict your mind from its worried fantasies about tomorrow and relocate it firmly into the undeniable reality of this moment, which, when you actually look at it, is very often perfectly manageable and safe. Another technique is to simply observe your anxious thoughts as if they were clouds drifting across the sky of your mind. You don't try to stop the clouds or argue with them. You just note their presence. There's the thought that I'm going to fail that presentation, and you let them drift on by without grabbing onto them and making them your entire weather system. This is the discipline of assent applied to anxiety. You are refusing to give your automatic agreement to every catastrophic prediction your mind generates. You are creating that vital space between the thought and your belief in the thought, and in that space you find your freedom to choose a different focus. The power of this practice lies in its immediacy. Right now, in this very second, what is actually wrong, not what might be wrong in an hour or tomorrow or next year, but right now. Is the roof falling in? Are you in immediate physical danger? In almost every case, the present moment is bearable. It's the projected future that feels unbearable. By anchoring yourself again and again in the right now, you drain the terrifying future of its power. You realize that your ability to handle this moment is a reliable indicator that you will likely be able to handle the next one when it comes, equipped with the resources you have in that future present. You are building a muscle of presence that grows stronger each time you choose to use it, making you less and less vulnerable to the hijacking attempts of an anxious imagination. So consider this: what specific worry about the future could you begin to loosen your grip on today, simply by bringing your full attention back, over and over, to the undeniable and often perfectly peaceful reality of what is actually happening right in front of you? This is the delicate and vital balance at the heart of living Stoicism, learning to engage with the world fully, passionately, and effectively without handing over the keys to your inner peace in the process. It's about being in the arena, not in the stands, but doing so with a steady heart and a clear mind. The greatest misapplication of this philosophy would be to use the idea of detachment as a reason to withdraw from life's complexities, to retreat into a shell of isolation under the guise of protecting your tranquility. True Stoicism is not a philosophy of escape. It is a philosophy of resilient and virtuous engagement. It asks not what we can avoid, but how we can participate wisely. Seneca, a man who was deeply immersed in the turbulent political life of ancient Rome, speaks directly to this point. He vehemently argued against the idea of the philosopher withdrawing completely from public service. He believed that wisdom was not meant to be hoarded in private contemplation, but was a gift to be applied for the common good. In his essay on tranquility of mind, he advises his friend Serenus that the wise man will not shut himself away from the world. Instead, he will engage in the affairs of state, in business, and in community, but he will do so with a spirit that remains his own. He writes that we should bring our philosophy with us into the public square, not use it as an excuse to never enter. The goal is to be involved without being infected, to contribute without being corroded by the chaos. Our inner calm is not a fragile ornament to be kept on a high shelf away from the world. It is a sturdy tool, a well-anchored foundation that allows us to operate effectively within the world's inevitable turbulence. Imagine a volunteer actively serving on their local neighborhood council. The meetings are often fraught with strong opinions, conflicting agendas, and personal grievances. It would be easy to become completely enmeshed in the drama, to take sides personally, to feel anger towards those who oppose your views, to tie your sense of accomplishment to whether your pet project gets approved. This is total engagement without detachment, and it leads to burnout and bitterness. The other easy option would be complete disengagement, to decide it's all too stressful and resign, staying home to tend only to your own private garden. This is detachment without engagement. The Stoic path, however, walks directly down the middle. The volunteer continues to serve. They attend every meeting, they listen carefully, they argue persuasively for what they believe is right for the community, and they cast their vote with integrity. But they do so from their inner citadel. When their idea is voted down, they feel a flicker of professional disappointment, but they do not internalize it as a personal rejection. They do not demonize those who disagreed with them. They understand that the process itself, with all its friction, is the work of a healthy community. They can sleep soundly that night, their inner calm undisturbed, because their self-worth was never on the ballot. They were fully engaged in the action, but detached from the specific, uncontrollable outcome. This balance transforms our approach to our duties, our careers, and our relationships. It allows us to be a passionate advocate without becoming a furious partisan. It lets us be a dedicated professional without becoming a workaholic whose identity is consumed by their job title. It enables us to be a loving partner without making our happiness entirely dependent on our significant other's mood or actions. We show up, we give our best effort, we care deeply about the results, but we remember that our ultimate peace does not rise or fall with them. Our center of gravity remains within. So let's turn this inward. Look at the landscape of your own life. Where might you have pulled back too far, using a desire for peace as a justification for avoiding something difficult but important? Perhaps there's a community group you stopped attending because the discussions got too heated, a professional network you avoid because it feels competitive and stressful, or even a relationship with a family member you've put at a distance because it's challenging. Now consider how you might reapproach that arena, not with a goal of winning or controlling it, but with a new goal, to simply be present within it, contributing your part while consciously practicing the art of holding onto your own calm center. Where is it time for you to step back in, not with armor and weapons, but with the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing your peace is not for the world to give and not for it to take away? This ability to remain steady and engaged without being consumed by frustration is perhaps nowhere more immediately useful than in the daily cultivation of patience. We often think of patience as a passive virtue, a matter of simply waiting without complaint. But from a Stoic perspective, it is something far more active and powerful, a deliberate practice of applying strategic detachment to the inevitable delays and obstacles of life. When we feel impatience rising within us, it is almost always a signal that our desires have outstripped our acceptance of reality's timing. We want the traffic to clear now. We want the project to be finished already. We want the line to move faster. Impatience is the emotional friction that arises from our resistance to the way things are unfolding in the present moment. It is a struggle against the current of time itself. Marcus Aurelius offers us a profound reframe for this struggle. He didn't see time as an enemy to be defeated or a resource to be maximized with frantic urgency. Instead, he counseled acceptance of nature's own rhythm. He wrote, "Accept the pace of nature. Her secret is patience." This is not a call to laziness or inaction. It is an invitation to align our internal clock with the fundamental, unhurried tempo of the world around us. A tree does not rage against the slowness of its growth. It simply grows season by season. A river does not become frustrated with the rocks in its path. It simply flows around them, gradually wearing them down over centuries. When we practice emotional detachment from our own frantic timetable, we begin to access this same kind of patience. We stop fighting the obstacle and start working with it, or simply accepting it as a temporary feature of the landscape. Consider one of the most universal modern tests of patience, sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Your initial, attached reaction might be a surge of frustration. Your body tenses, your grip tightens on the steering wheel, and your mind spins with stories of injustice. This is wasting my time. I'm going to be late because of these incompetent drivers. Why does this always happen to me? This internal struggle doesn't move the cars an inch forward, but it does generate a storm of stress hormones, raising your blood pressure and ruining your mood before you've even reached your destination. Now apply the Stoic shift. You take a breath and consciously detach from the story. You acknowledge the reality. The traffic is here. It is outside your control. Your only domain of control is your response within this metal box. You can choose to use this time. Perhaps you put on a podcast you've been meaning to hear, or you simply use the forced pause as an opportunity to observe your surroundings, to notice the sky, to practice being present without an agenda. The traffic jam hasn't changed, but your experience of it is transformed from a stressful obstacle into a neutral, perhaps even useful, interval of time. The patience you cultivate isn't about waiting, it's about how you choose to inhabit the wait. This practice extends far beyond the highway. It applies to waiting for test results, for a career opportunity to arise, for a personal goal to be achieved, or for a loved one to work through their own process. Impatience shouts that things should be different than they are. Patience, born of detachment, quietly acknowledges things as they are and asks, "What can I do within this reality?" It understands that some things cannot be rushed, that growth and change operate on a schedule that does not consult our personal desires. This week, you will undoubtedly face a test of patience. It might be a slow-moving queue at the grocery store, a delayed response to an important email, or a personal project that isn't progressing as quickly as you'd like. When you feel that familiar heat of frustration begin to rise, see it as an invitation. That is the moment to create a little emotional distance, to unhook your peace from the outcome you cannot force, and to reclaim your agency over the one thing you always control, your attitude in the here and now. This journey toward inner resilience and emotional mastery ultimately leads us to a profound and deeply personal destination: the rediscovery of our own authentic self. We've talked about creating space to respond rather than react, about loving our fate, and about conserving our mental energy. But all of these practices are in service of a greater goal: the ability to live a life that is genuinely our own, a life guided not by the noise of external expectations, but by the quiet, steady compass of our own values and character. Strategic detachment, far from making us cold or withdrawn, is actually the very process that clears away the clutter of other people's opinions, social pressures, and conditioned fears, allowing us to hear our own inner voice with unmistakable clarity. Think of your authentic self not as something you need to find or create, but as something that has been there all along, buried under layers of shoulds, musts, and supposed tasks. From a very young age, we are conditioned to seek approval. We learn that certain behaviors bring praise and love, while others bring disapproval or rejection. Over time, we can become so skilled at performing the version of ourselves that wins external validation that we lose touch with who we actually are beneath the performance. We make choices based on what will make us look good, what will avoid conflict, what will please our parents, our peers, or our culture. We end up living a life that is a reaction to external forces, rather than an expression of an internal truth. This is where the ancient wisdom of Epictetus offers a radical path to liberation. He famously said, "It is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows." But he also gave us a more direct command for living authentically. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. His point was devastatingly simple. The hunger for external approval is a trap. The moment you make your self-worth contingent on the opinions of others, you hand them the keys to your entire emotional state. You become a puppet and they hold the strings. The only way to break free is to become utterly indifferent to being judged, to being misunderstood, or to being dismissed. This isn't about becoming arrogant or antisocial. It's about reaching a place of such inner security that another person's opinion, whether flattering or critical, simply becomes data, not a directive. Consider a scenario many of us will recognize. Imagine a talented young artist who feels a deep, personal calling to create abstract, expressive art that explores complex emotional themes. However, she quickly discovers that the popular, commercial success in her local scene comes from painting cheerful, realistic landscapes. Galleries want the landscapes. Her family praises the landscapes, saying they're so much prettier and more sellable. friends encourage her to just give the people what they want. Every time she tries to paint from her soul, she is met with confused looks or polite suggestions to stick with what works. The pressure to conform, to be popular, to be financially secure is immense. If she operates from a place of attachment to these external rewards, she will slowly abandon her own voice. Her work will become technically proficient but spiritually empty, a hollow echo of market demand. But if she practices Stoic detachment, she makes a profound shift. She detaches from the need for gallery approval, from her family's specific praise, from the fear of being seen as a weird or struggling artist. This detachment doesn't mean she doesn't care about making a living or connecting with an audience. It means she refuses to let those desires override her core principle, to create art that is true to her own vision. She embraces the possibility of being thought foolish for pursuing a less commercial path. The miraculous result of this detachment is that it forces her to ask a new, more authentic question. Instead of "what should I paint to be successful?" she asks, "what must I paint to be true to myself?" This is how detachment paves the road to authenticity. It silences the deafening noise of the world so you can finally hear your own whisper. This applies to countless choices, big and small, that define our lives. The career we choose because it sounds impressive rather than because it aligns with our skills and passions. The relationships we stay in because we fear being alone more than we value being true to ourselves. The political or social opinions we voice because they are popular in our circle, not because we've truly reasoned them through. Each time we choose based on external pressure, we move further away from our authentic self. Each time we practice detachment from that pressure, we take a step back home. So I want to leave you with a question to sit with, one that requires real honesty. Look back over your own life, over the decisions that have shaped your path. Can you identify a time when you made a significant choice primarily to gain approval, to avoid disapproval, or to fit in with a certain group? Perhaps it was a subject you studied, a job you took, a way you dressed, or even a belief you pretended to hold. Now, imagine for a moment how that same decision might have unfolded if you had possessed the tools of Stoic detachment, if you had been able to calmly release the grip of wanting to be liked, accepted, or validated. How might that emotional and mental space have allowed a different, more authentic choice to emerge from within you? Now, let's apply this powerful tool of detachment to one of the most universal and often painful human experiences: receiving criticism. It's a moment that can instantly trigger a cascade of defensive emotions: a flushed face, a racing heart, the immediate internal scream of "that's not fair." Or "they just don't get me." Our ego, that fragile construct we work so hard to build and protect, feels under direct attack. But what if we could reframe this entire experience? What if, instead of an attack, we could learn to see criticism as mere data, a potentially useful piece of information that we have the power to evaluate with calm discernment, rather than a verdict we must instinctively accept or angrily reject? This is the heart of handling criticism with true Stoic poise. The Roman Stoic Seneca offers us a brilliantly simple two-part filter for any critique that comes our way. He advises us to first consider the source, and then to consider the substance. Before we even engage with the content of the criticism, we are to calmly ask, who is delivering this feedback? Is this person credible? Do they have expertise in this area? Are they generally a thoughtful and fair-minded individual, or are they known for carelessness, jealousy, or spite? This first question applies the discipline of assent to the social realm. We are not automatically assenting to the idea that the critic is a legitimate authority. We are pausing to evaluate their character and motives. A hurtful comment from a known rival carries a different weight than constructive feedback from a trusted mentor. The second filter is about the content itself. Is there truth in this? Is this feedback actually valuable? Is there something here I can use to improve, regardless of how it was delivered? This separates the potential wisdom from the emotional wrapper it came in. By applying these two filters, we transform criticism from a personal grenade into a collection of separate components, some useful, some not, that we can choose to pick up or leave behind. Imagine a work scenario so many can relate to. You've just presented a proposal you spent weeks crafting. You feel proud of it. Afterwards, a colleague pulls you aside. Their tone is slightly condescending. They say, "That was a brave attempt, but it's clear you're not really grasping the core issues here. The financial projections are naive, and the timeline is completely unrealistic." The immediate, ego-driven reaction is one of pure defensiveness. You might stammer out a justification, or you might retreat in wounded silence, spending the rest of the day fuming and replaying the comment, your confidence in tatters. Now apply the Stoic pause. You take a breath and engage Seneca's filters. First, the source. Is this colleague a financial expert? No, they work in a different department. Do they have a history of offering helpful, specific feedback? No, they often make sweeping, negative statements. This doesn't automatically dismiss their comment, but it contextualizes it. Then you look at the substance. Is there anything valuable here, even if the delivery was poor? You might separate their personal jab, brave attempt, not grasping, from the two specific claims, the financial projections and the timeline. You then take those two specific points to someone whose opinion you truly trust, a mentor or an actual finance expert, and ask for their candid assessment. The rude colleague's feedback becomes not a judgment on your worth, but a simple prompt for a specific, targeted check-in. You've detached from the insult and mined the interaction for any potential useful ore, leaving the emotional slag behind. This process achieves the ultimate goal. It allows you to learn from the experience without letting it destabilize your core sense of self. Your self-worth remains anchored in your own knowledge of your effort, your integrity, and your capacity to learn, not in the fluctuating opinions of others, whether they are praise or criticism. You understand that feedback, even when delivered poorly, is often just a signpost pointing toward an area for potential growth, not a billboard declaring your failure. The Stoic doesn't seek criticism, but they welcome the chance to test their mettle against it, to use it as a whetstone to sharpen their skills and their character. So the next time you feel that familiar sting of critique, I invite you to pause and ask yourself a new set of questions. Can I temporarily set aside my defensive feelings to evaluate who this is coming from? And even if the source is flawed, is there a single, valuable nugget of truth hidden in this that I can use to become better at what I do? Your answer will determine whether the criticism becomes a weapon used against you or a tool you use for your own improvement. Think of your mental energy as a finite and precious currency, a daily allowance of focus and clarity that you can either invest wisely or fritter away on things that offer no real return. Every time we allow ourselves to be pulled into emotional turbulence over events we cannot change, opinions we cannot alter, or outcomes we cannot guarantee, we are making a withdrawal from that limited account for absolutely no gain. It is the ultimate bad investment. The practice of strategic detachment is in many ways a form of profound energy conservation. It's about consciously deciding to stop spending your inner resources on psychic dramas that drain you without moving you forward, preserving that vital strength for the pursuits that truly matter, your goals, your relationships, your growth, and your peace. Marcus Aurelius, who bore the unimaginable weight of leading an empire, understood this principle of conservation intimately. In the private pages of his meditations, he wrote, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." This is more than just a philosophical observation. It's a practical warning about energy expenditure. When we assign supreme importance to external outcomes, whether we get the promotion, whether a certain person likes us, whether it rains on our day off, we hand over the keys to our mental energy to forces we cannot command. We become like a gardener who spends all day staring at the sky, shaking their fist at the clouds, instead of tending to the plants within their reach. The frustration, the anxiety, the disappointment, these are all energy leaks. They are watts of mental power burning off into the air, power that could have been used to water the garden, pull the weeds, or simply enjoy the beauty of what is already growing. Consider a common, modern source of this energy drain, the endless refresh. You send a text message to a friend and they don't reply immediately. An hour goes by. Then too, your mind, if left untrained, might start crafting elaborate stories. Are they angry with me? Did I say something wrong? Maybe they're ignoring me. You check your phone constantly. You reread the message, analyzing it for hidden tones. You might even draft a follow-up text, then delete it, then draft another. This entire internal melodrama can consume 30 minutes of intense mental focus, generating genuine stress and anxiety. And for what? The reality is almost always mundane. Your friend is simply busy, their phone is on silent, or they saw the message and plan to reply later when they have time. By emotionally attaching yourself to an immediate response, something entirely outside your control, you have voluntarily torched a significant amount of your daily mental energy on a fictional problem. The Stoic approach is to perform the action within your control, sending a thoughtful message, and then to detach from the timeline of the response. You let it go. You trust that an answer will come when it comes, and you redirect your precious attention to the task in front of you. The energy you saved by not spiraling into worry is now available for your work, your creativity, or for being fully present with the people right in front of you. This conservation has a compound effect. Every time you choose not to engage in office gossip, you save the energy you would have spent on negativity and speculation. Every time you refuse to mentally argue with a stranger's opinion online, you protect your focus for the books and ideas that truly enrich you. Every time you accept a minor inconvenience, like a delayed flight, without adding a layer of emotional protest, you preserve your stamina for handling the actual logistics of rebooking. It's not about becoming passive, it's about becoming selective. It's about asking before you engage emotionally, is this mine to carry? Is this a battle that needs fighting? Or is it a distraction I can simply observe and let pass? This is how we move from a life of constant reactive exhaustion to one of proactive, purposeful engagement. We are no longer at the mercy of every passing stimulus. We are the stewards of our own attention. So take a moment to look at the landscape of your own mind today. What is one specific drama, one persistent worry, or one fruitless frustration that you can consciously choose to detach from, not as an act of neglect, but as an act of reclaiming your energy? What could you do with that reclaimed focus if you invested it back into something that truly serves your life? This same principle of conserving energy through detachment becomes a superpower when we step into roles of guidance, whether as a parent shaping a young life or a leader steering a team. The instinct to control, to hover, to ensure every detail unfolds exactly as we envision is powerful, especially when we feel deeply responsible for the outcome. But Stoicism offers a more profound and ultimately more effective model, leading not through tight-fisted control, but through the powerful, calm example of our own character. It's the practice of detached compassion, where your deep care for someone's growth is expressed not by doing the work for them, but by creating a safe space for them to learn, to struggle, and to discover their own capabilities, even if their path looks different from the one you might have chosen for them. The Stoics placed immense importance on the concept of leading by example because they understood that true influence is not exerted through commands, but through the silent, magnetic pull of a well-lived life. Epictetus, who taught students of all ages, emphasized that a teacher's most powerful lesson is their own conduct. He said, "If you would be a good reader, read; if a writer, write." This simple statement cuts to the heart of Stoic leadership. You cannot demand patience from your children while you yourself rage at a traffic jam. You cannot ask your team for innovative thinking if you panic and micromanage at the first sign of an unexpected problem. Your actions, your emotional responses, your attitude in the face of adversity, these are the real curriculum. Strategic detachment allows you to become that calm, consistent example. It means you are so secure in your own inner citadel that you are not thrown off course by the mistakes, emotions, or divergent choices of those you guide. Your steadiness becomes their anchor, and your trust in their process becomes the soil in which their confidence can grow. Imagine a classic parenting scenario. Your teenager is struggling with a challenging school project. It's late, they're frustrated, and the impulse to simply step in and take over is overwhelming. You see the right way to do it, and you want to save them from the pain of failure or a poor grade. The attached reactive response is to hover, to constantly correct, to finally grab the keyboard and say, "Here, just let me do it." This might solve the immediate problem of the project, but it teaches a devastating long-term lesson that your child is not capable and that your love is contingent on them doing things your way. Now apply Stoic detachment. You recognize that your child's struggle and even their potential failure are not emergencies that threaten your worth as a parent. You detach from the specific outcome of the grade and attach instead to the deeper value of their resilience. You sit with them not to do the work but to offer calm encouragement. You might say, "I can see you're really frustrated. This is tough. What's one small part you feel you can tackle right now?" You are managing your own anxiety about their struggle, and in doing so, you create a container for them to manage theirs. You are leading by the example of your own calm in the storm of their frustration. The project is theirs. Your supportive, unwavering presence is your contribution. This translates seamlessly into the world of leadership and management. Consider a team leader whose group is working on a high-stakes client proposal. The attached leader, fearing failure, micromanages every comma, demands constant updates, and reacts with visible stress to every minor setback. This environment breeds anxiety, stifles creativity, and teaches team members to hide problems rather than bring them forward. The Stoic leader, practicing detached compassion, sets the vision and the boundaries clearly, then empowers the team to execute. They are available for guidance, but they do not hover. When a problem arises, they don't react with blame or panic. They respond with focused curiosity. "Okay, this happened. What have we learned? What's our next best move?" They detach from their own ego's need for the project to be a flawless reflection of their personal genius, and instead attach to the goal of cultivating a capable, confident, and autonomous team. Their leadership is demonstrated not in their control, but in their composure. Their team isn't working for them, they are working with them, inspired by a leader who trusts them enough to let them own their work, and who is steady enough to support them without taking over. This is the transformative power of detached compassion. It transforms guidance from an act of imposition into an act of liberation. It requires the strength to hold space for another person's journey without needing to dictate its every turn. So whether you're guiding a child through their homework or a team through a complex project, the most important question you can ask yourself is this: am I trying to control the outcome to soothe my own anxiety, or am I providing the calm, supportive presence that will allow them to navigate this challenge and discover their own strength? The answer will determine whether you are building dependence or fostering true, resilient independence. But how do we move from simply understanding this concept to actually living it, to releasing the specific regrets that keep us up at night? The answer lies in a profound shift of focus, a deliberate act of mental redirection that Seneca himself championed. He didn't advise us to simply forget the past or pretend it didn't happen. Instead, he urged a practice of conscious reframing. He suggested we look back not to punish ourselves but to learn. In his letters, he writes about the importance of reviewing one's day, but with a focus not on self-condemnation, but on self-instruction. He advises us to ask, what have I cured myself of today? What fault have I resisted? In what respect am I better? This turns the past from a gallery of our failures into a workshop for our improvement. The mistake itself is a fixed point in time, immutable, but the lesson it contains is a living, breathing tool we can use to build a better present. Detachment allows us to extract that tool without carrying the heavy, useless weight of the shame. To truly grasp this, let's consider a story, one that might feel familiar in its contours. Imagine a talented software engineer named Lena. Early in her career, she was part of a small, passionate team developing a new application. During a critical phase, under immense pressure, she made a coding error that wasn't caught in testing. After the app launched, the bug caused a significant data breach for their early users. The fallout was severe, the company's reputation was damaged, they lost key clients, and Lena was let go. For years, she carried this event like a lead weight. Every time she faced a new challenge, the memory of that failure whispered that she wasn't capable. She defined herself by that single, terrible outcome, allowing it to color every subsequent opportunity with the hue of that old fear. She was attached to the identity of the person who caused the breach. Her liberation began not when she forgot the event, but when she finally applied Stoic detachment to it. She had to consciously separate what was unchangeable from what was learnable. The breach itself, the lost job, the disappointment, these were facts. They were in the past, and no amount of guilt could undo them. But what she could change was the meaning she assigned to them. She began to ask Seneca's questions. What had she learned? She had learned the critical importance of peer review and robust testing protocols. She had learned how to communicate more clearly under pressure. She had learned profound humility. By detaching from the emotional label of catastrophic failure, she could suddenly see the event as the most expensive and effective training course of her life. The mistake didn't define her, the wisdom she gleaned from it did. She eventually started her own consultancy, specializing in helping companies build ethical and secure digital infrastructures, a career path directly inspired by ensuring others didn't make her same error. She didn't erase her past, she repurposed it into her greatest strength. This is the active, transformative work of releasing regret. It's not a passive act of forgetting. It's an assertive act of reclamation. You are reclaiming your present moment from the ghost of a past you cannot alter. You are choosing to stop paying a continuing emotional tax on a debt that life has already collected. The Stoic practice here is to sit with that old memory and to perform a kind of mental alchemy. Acknowledge the pain, the embarrassment, the consequence, feel it fully. Then, with deliberate intention, ask yourself, setting the guilt aside for a moment, what did this experience teach me about resilience, about preparation? About my own values, what strength did I discover in myself in the aftermath that I never knew I had? By answering these questions, you are not justifying the mistake, you are justifying the journey. You are affirming that even your stumbles were part of the path that brought you to the wisdom you hold today. So I want to offer you a challenge, one that requires courage and honesty. Look back over your own history. Is there one specific regret, one past mistake that you have allowed to overstay its welcome in your mind? Perhaps it's a hurtful word said in anger to someone you can no longer apologize to, a financial misstep that still causes you anxiety, or a professional opportunity you feel you foolishly let slip away. Now imagine what it would feel like to finally grant yourself a pardon, not because the action was okay, but because your self-punishment has served its term and is now only preventing you from building a new future. What if you could gently detach from the heavy story of failure and instead hold that memory as a crucial, if painful, lesson that helped shape the more discerning, more compassionate, or more resilient person you are now? What past mistake can you, in this moment, choose to finally release through the liberating power of acceptance? It's a fascinating and beautiful paradox that the very act of letting go of our demands for more can actually open the floodgates to a deeper appreciation for what is already here. This is the powerful interplay between detachment and gratitude, two practices that might seem separate but are in fact deeply intertwined, each one fueling and strengthening the other. When we are perpetually attached to our desires, to that next promotion, that bigger house, that ideal relationship, we are living in a state of subtle, persistent lack. Our focus is fixed on the horizon, on what we don't yet have, and this constant straining forward makes it nearly impossible to truly see and savor the abundance that already surrounds us. We become like a person at a magnificent feast, so fixated on the one dish that isn't on the table that we fail to taste the delicious food right in front of us. Detachment works by gently prying our attention away from that absent dish and returning it to the full plate we already hold. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who knew a great deal about living with very little, understood this connection intimately. He was born a slave and lived a life of simplicity and hardship, yet his writings are filled with a profound sense of contentment and appreciation for the most basic elements of life. He didn't see this as settling, he saw it as the highest form of wisdom. He encouraged his students to actively practice appreciating simple things: the warmth of the sun, the taste of clean water, the ability to draw a full breath. His famous injunction was to remember that these are not small things, but that we simply become accustomed to them and take them for granted. He said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." This rejoicing is the essence of gratitude, and it becomes possible only when we detach from the belief that we are entitled to more, to better, to different. Detachment from entitlement isn't about lowering your standards. It's about raising your awareness to the incredible wealth of things you already receive for free every single day. Think about the simple act of turning on a tap for a glass of water. For most of us, this is a thoughtless, automatic action. We feel no particular surge of joy when clean, safe water flows effortlessly into our cup. Why? Because we feel entitled to it. We believe it is our right, an unquestioned constant in our lives. Now, imagine that same person spending a week camping in the wilderness, having to hike a mile to a stream and then purify every drop they drink. When they return home and turn that tap, the experience is transformed. That first glass of tap water might taste like the most miraculous, delicious thing they've ever consumed. What changed? The water is the same. The plumbing is the same. What changed was their internal state of attachment. Their temporary detachment from the convenience created a space for a powerful wave of genuine gratitude to flood in. They were no longer entitled to the water, they were gifted it. This is the magic that happens when we consciously practice loosening our grip on what we assume we deserve. We can build this awareness through a simple but powerful daily ritual: pairing a gratitude practice with a moment of conscious detachment. This doesn't require a lengthy journaling session. It can be as simple as a mental exercise each evening. As you reflect on 3 things you're grateful for that day, take one of them and consciously explore the feeling of non-attachment to it. For instance, you might be grateful for your health. Instead of just noting it, sit with the thought for a moment. I am deeply grateful for the health I experienced today, and I also understand that it is not a permanent possession guaranteed to me. It is a gift for this day. This isn't meant to inspire fear, but to heighten appreciation. By acknowledging the temporary nature of our health, our relationships, our comforts, we don't diminish them, we make them more precious. We stop treating them like default settings and start experiencing them as the daily miracles they truly are. This combination practice gratitude for what is, paired with detachment from the guarantee of its continuation, cultivates a rich, sober, and incredibly powerful form of thankfulness that is resilient to life's inevitable changes. This practice fundamentally rewires our relationship with desire. A mind that is attached is a mind that is always wanting. It looks at a beautiful sunset and almost immediately thinks, I wish I could see this every day, or I need to take a photo to keep it. The experience itself is almost overshadowed by the desire to possess it, to control it, to make it permanent. A mind that practices detachment can look at the same sunset and simply absorb it. There is no secondary layer of wanting. There is just the sheer, stunning beauty of the moment, experienced fully and completely without any strings attached. In that space of pure experience, unclouded by the noise of desire, gratitude arises naturally and effortlessly. It is not something you have to force yourself to feel. It is the default emotional response to truly seeing the world without the filter of your own demands. So as you move through your days, I invite you to sit with this question and observe your own mind. In your own life, how might reducing that constant, low-level hum of attachment to your various desires, for more stuff, for different circumstances, for guaranteed outcomes, actually increase your capacity for a genuine, heartfelt thankfulness for the life you are already living? Now let's bring this ancient wisdom to one of the most powerful and pervasive forces in our modern world, the digital landscape of social media. This is where Stoic detachment moves from philosophical principle to essential survival skill. Our feeds are engineered to hijack our attention and trigger our emotions, constantly presenting us with curated highlights from other people's lives, outrage-inducing headlines, and endless opportunities for comparison and gossip. It's a world that seems designed to provoke exactly the kind of automatic, emotional ascents the Stoics warned us about. But we don't have to be passive victims of this digital environment. We can learn to navigate it with the same strategic distance we apply to the physical world, using it as a tool rather than letting it use us as a source of engagement. Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with the rumors and political gossip of ancient Rome, offered advice that feels startlingly relevant today. He wrote, "How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself to make it just and holy." He was pointing to the incredible mental energy we waste by concerning ourselves with the lives and opinions of others, energy that could be directed toward our own character and actions. Social media is essentially a globalized, amplified version of this ancient problem. It's a fire hose of what our neighbors are saying, doing, and thinking, and it's presented in a way that constantly invites our judgment, our envy, and our outrage. Applying Stoic distance means consciously turning down the volume on that noise and refocusing the spotlight on our own internal dashboard. Think about the phenomenon of social comparison, one of the most common sources of digital distress. You scroll through your feed and see a former colleague celebrating a lavish promotion, a friend on a perfect family vacation, an acquaintance showing off their new car. The immediate, untrained impulse is to compare their highlight reel to your behind-the-scenes reality. This triggers a cascade of negative impressions. I'm falling behind. My life isn't as good, why don't I have that? If you assent to these impressions, you feel a pang of envy, insecurity, or dissatisfaction with your own life. The Stoic intervention happens in that split second. You pause and apply the discipline of assent. You might tell yourself, I am seeing a single, curated moment from their life. I have no idea what struggles or challenges they face outside this frame. Their success is not my failure. My journey is my own. This isn't about dismissing their achievement. It's about refusing to let it become a measuring stick for your own worth. You detach your self-esteem from the digital performance of others. Similarly, the culture of outrage that thrives online is a perfect testing ground for Stoic principles. Algorithms are designed to surface content that triggers strong emotional reactions because that's what keeps us clicking and commenting. We are constantly presented with opinions we find infuriating, news that makes us despair, and arguments that demand we pick a side. The reactive, attached approach is to dive headfirst into the fray, to leave an angry comment, to share the post with a caption of pure indignation, to let that wave of outrage wash over us and dictate our emotional state for the next hour. The Stoic approach is to first create space. Before you engage, ask the Stoic question, is this within my control? You cannot control the existence of the offensive post or the person who made it. You can only control your judgment of it and your response. Is your angry comment likely to change anyone's mind? Or is it merely adding to the digital noise and raising your own blood pressure? Often, the most powerful response is to simply scroll past, to refuse to give the outrage your attention, which is the currency it seeks. You conserve your mental energy for causes and actions in the real world where you can actually affect change. So how can we practically cultivate this mindful engagement? Start by curating your digital environment with intention. Your feed is not a neutral space, it's an environment you can shape. Unfollow accounts that consistently trigger envy or anger. Mute keywords that draw you into pointless arguments. Actively seek out and follow voices that inspire, educate, or bring genuine joy. This is not avoidance, it's the digital equivalent of choosing your physical companions wisely. Secondly, implement a pre-commitment rule. Before you open an app, set a clear intention for why you are doing so. Are you checking for messages from specific friends? Are you looking for inspiration for a project? Once that task is complete, close the app. This prevents the mindless, endless scroll that is so often a recipe for emotional entanglement. Finally, practice a digital version of the evening review. At the end of the day, briefly reflect on your online interactions. When did you feel a spike of envy? When did you feel the pull to argue? Simply noting these moments without judgment increases your self-awareness and makes it easier to choose differently next time. The goal is not to quit social media, but to transform your relationship with it from one of passive consumption and reaction to one of active, intentional use. How can you begin to use these platforms as a tool for connection and learning, while consciously protecting your inner citadel from the comparison, outrage, and gossip they so effortlessly propagate? What we've been exploring isn't a switch you can simply flip on. It's a muscle, and like any muscle, it requires consistent, deliberate training to grow strong. The ability to create that vital space between an event and your reaction, to observe your emotions without being hijacked by them, is not a talent you're born with, it's a skill you build, rep by rep, day by day. The ancient Stoics understood this perfectly. They didn't just philosophize, they practiced. They saw their philosophy not as a set of ideas to be debated, but as a set of exercises to be performed, a daily training regimen for the mind. Their writings are filled with these mental drills: the premeditation of evils, the view from above, the discipline of assent, all designed as weightlifting for the soul, strengthening their capacity for virtue and resilience against the inevitable shocks of fortune. This is profoundly empowering because it means that your current level of reactivity isn't a life sentence. Wherever you are right now, you can start. You can begin the work of forging a more resilient, more peaceful, and more free version of yourself through simple, sustained effort. The most effective way to begin this training is to start small. Don't launch your practice by trying to remain perfectly serene during a major life crisis. That's like trying to bench press 300 pounds on your first day at the gym. You'll only injure yourself and become discouraged. Instead, seek out the minor, daily irritations. These are your perfect training weights: the driver who cuts you off in traffic, the long, slow-moving line at the coffee shop, the notification that a package delivery has been delayed, the burnt toast. These are not inconveniences, they are opportunities. They are your daily drills. In each of these tiny moments, you have a choice. You can follow the well-worn neural pathway of immediate frustration, sighing loudly, muttering under your breath, and letting that small event cast a shadow over the next 10 minutes of your life. Or you can seize it as a chance to practice. You can take one conscious breath. You can notice the initial surge of irritation in your body, the clenched jaw, the tightened gut, and simply name it. Ah, there is frustration. You can then ask the Stoic question: is this within my control? The answer almost always is no. You cannot control the traffic, the line, or the delivery driver. Your only domain of control is your response. By choosing, even once, to not fuel that initial spark of annoyance, you have successfully completed a rep. You have strengthened the neural pathway of pause. You have made it slightly more likely that you will be able to do it again the next time, and with a slightly heavier weight. This is how resilience is constructed, not in a single, heroic act of willpower, but in the accumulation of countless small victories over your own automatic reactions. Every time you choose to breathe through a minor irritation instead of escalating it, you are adding another brick to your inner citadel. You are proving to yourself, through direct experience, that you are not a slave to your impulses. This gradual process builds a deep, authentic confidence that isn't based on positive affirmations, but on the lived evidence of your own growing self-command. You start to trust yourself more because you have seen yourself handle life's small friction with more grace. And this accumulated trust becomes the foundation that allows you to eventually face larger challenges without being overthrown. The practice itself becomes its own reward, as you begin to experience the immediate sense of freedom that comes from not being yanked around by every minor event. The goal isn't to eliminate life's annoyances. That's impossible. The goal is to change your relationship to them, to see each one not as a personal affront but as another invitation to train, to grow stronger, and to claim a little more of your inner freedom. So the most important question you can ask yourself right now is not when you will achieve perfect Stoic tranquility, but what tiny, manageable practice you can commit to starting today. What is one small, recurring irritation in your daily life that you can consciously designate as your training ground? Perhaps it's the daily ritual of checking your work email, which often contains at least one message that triggers a knee-jerk stress response. Can you commit to taking 3 deep breaths before you open your inbox, setting an intention to respond rather than react? Maybe it's the moment you walk through your front door after a long day, often carrying the accumulated tension of the hours before. Can you commit to a 60-second pause, hanging up your coat, taking off your shoes, and consciously letting go of the day's events before you engage with your family? Or perhaps it's the first thing in the morning when you reach for your phone to check the news. Can you commit to delaying that for just 5 minutes, to instead use that time to look out the window and mentally prepare for the day using the Stoic dichotomy of control? The specific practice matters far less than the consistency. Choose one thing, something so small that it feels almost trivial, and make a pact with yourself to do it for just 1 week. That single, small commitment is the seed from which an unshakable resilience will eventually grow. And so we arrive at the ultimate destination of this entire practice, the profound freedom that strategic detachment was always designed to deliver. This isn't a freedom from feeling or from the world itself, but a freedom within it. It is the liberation to choose your own path through any circumstance, to author your actions from a place of inner clarity rather than having them written for you by external pressures or internal impulses. Every tool we've discussed, the pause of the discipline of assent, the loving embrace of amor fati, the perspective of the view from above, converges on this single, magnificent point, the reclaiming of your own agency. You are no longer a passive reactor, buffeted by the storms of fortune and emotion, but a conscious responder, equipped with a moral and rational compass that always points toward your chosen North Star of virtue. The Stoic slave-turned-teacher Epictetus, who knew more about external constraint than most, spoke to the heart of this inner liberty with breathtaking power. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," and he went even further, declaring, "Is freedom anything else than the right to live as we wish?" Nothing else. He cuts through all the noise to identify the one thing that can never be chained, taxed, or stolen from you: your ability to form your own judgments and choose your own responses. This is the only possession that is truly, irrevocably yours. An emperor can command your actions, a captor can bind your body, but no one on earth can force you to assent to an impression you know to be false, or to desire something you have judged to be without value. Your inner citadel, once fortified, is impregnable. This is the Stoic conception of freedom in its purest form, not the political freedom to do whatever you want, but the existential freedom to want what is right and to do it regardless of the situation. It is the freedom to choose your attitude in any set of circumstances, to find meaning even in suffering, and to align your actions with your deepest principles, not your most fleeting fears. This transforms the entire concept of detachment from what it might have seemed at the beginning, a withdrawal or a disengagement, into its true nature, the ultimate form of empowerment. It is the power to not be manipulated by advertising that preys on your insecurities. It is the power to remain calm in a crisis when everyone else is panicking. It is the power to receive both criticism and praise without letting either one alter your course. It is the power to love others without needing them to validate you. When you are not enslaved by your desires for specific outcomes, your aversions to discomfort, or your attachments to other people's opinions, you become incredibly powerful. Your energy is no longer siphoned off into managing disappointment, suppressing anger, or seeking approval. It is freed up for purposeful action, for creative expression, and for genuine connection. You are empowered because your source of power is no longer out there in the unpredictable world. It is right here in your reasoned choice. This brings us to a final, pivotal question, one that invites you to move from understanding to application. The goal of all this is not just to admire the philosophy, but to live it. So I want you to turn this lens directly onto your own life with complete honesty. Look across the different domains of your existence, your career, your relationships, your personal goals, your inner world. In which one area do you most feel that your freedom of response has been hijacked? Where do you feel the gap between an event and your reaction is the smallest, where you are most likely to be on autopilot, controlled by a trigger you haven't mastered? Perhaps it's the flash of temper when a family member pushes a particular button, a habit of defensiveness when receiving feedback at work, or a spiral of anxiety the moment you face financial uncertainty. Identify that single arena. That is your training ground. That is the place where you most want to reclaim what we might call your responsibility, your ability to respond with choice rather than react with conditioning. This isn't about achieving perfection overnight. It is about committing to that first, conscious breath in the heat of the moment, about creating just 1 inch of space where before there was none. That single inch is where your freedom begins, and it is a space that no one and nothing can ever take from you. And so our exploration brings us full circle, back to where we began, but with a profoundly shifted perspective. We started by untangling a widespread misconception, the idea that Stoic detachment is a cold, emotionless state of being. But through this journey, we've uncovered its true nature, a dynamic and deeply intelligent form of emotional mastery. This isn't about building walls or shutting down what you feel. It's about developing the keen self-awareness to understand your emotions, the space to observe them without being ruled by them, and the clarity to choose your response rather than simply reacting. It is the very essence of emotional intelligence in action, the ability to make your inner world a place of strength, not chaos. The core themes we've walked through are the pillars of this practice. First and foremost, strategic detachment is about management, never suppression. It's the difference between acknowledging a storm and becoming one. It's about feeling the full force of anger, grief, or anxiety, yet having the discipline to not let that force dictate your actions. This practice hinges entirely on self-awareness, that crucial ability to look within and recognize your own triggers, your patterns, and the stories you tell yourself that so often fuel your emotional fires. And from this place of managed feeling and clear self-knowledge emerges the ultimate reward, a mind capable of clearer thinking, unclouded by reactive emotion, and a heart capable of a deeper, more resilient peace that isn't dependent on everything going right. The Roman philosopher Seneca, whose letters have guided so much of our discussion, captured this inner achievement perfectly. He wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future, not to amuse ourselves with either hopes or fears, but to rest satisfied with what we have, which is sufficient. The greatest blessings of mankind are within us and within our reach." A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not. This is the tranquility that comes from within, the peace that is not a reward for a perfect life, but a wise way of moving through an imperfect one. It is the quiet confidence that you possess an unshakable core, no matter what the world throws your way. This wisdom isn't meant to be admired from a distance, it's meant to be lived. And the best way to begin is not with a grand overhaul, but with a single, small step. I want to invite you to choose just one insight from our time together and put it into practice this week. Maybe it's the discipline of assent, catching yourself before you automatically agree with a negative first impression. Perhaps it's taking the view from above the next time a problem feels overwhelming, to see it in its true proportion. Or maybe it's simply practicing amor fati, looking at one small inconvenience and asking, "How can I use this? I would love to hear how it goes." Your experiences are what turn philosophy from theory into lived truth. Share your story in the comments below, what you tried, what you noticed, what challenged you. Let's learn from each other and build a community around this practice of thoughtful living. If you found this journey valuable and you're ready to go deeper, consider subscribing to the channel. This is just the beginning. There is so much more ancient wisdom to explore, more practical tools to discover, and more ways to apply these timeless principles to the complex, beautiful challenge of modern life. Thank you for your time.